What you are about to see is a real-life story. The accounts have gone into great detail to give each side's version of this an exclusive one, we understand. One of the most talked about.
All right. Hello, Bernardo, and welcome to Pifi number 84.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Always a pleasure to be here talking to you guys.
And thank you to Alexei, I'm sorry. I was just getting a text from my son, Alex. So I said, Alex, sorry, Alexei. Thank you for at the last minute there, Alexei. Coming in. Are you with us, Alexei? You look frozen there.
Yeah, his image is frozen.
Okay, well, he'll catch up. Maybe he had to restart a few minutes ago. But thank you, Bernardo. I know you're busy, and I really appreciate you taking time to come and visit, lay people.
Oh. I very much enjoy being here with you.
Thank you. And we were just talking off the air about, how hard it is for me sometimes to prepare for these kind of interviews. But you are always so good and gracious with, you know what I mean? I mean, you're a good guy, and you don't, like you said, you don't have to do the highbrow content. I mean, that's fun, and I actually love talking with you and others about philosophy and physics because I chose a path early in life to be a design build contractor, and but I always loved physics and philosophy, so I really appreciate you joining us.
All this, complicated theoretical stuff. It's what I do. It's the stuff I have to do. But no, I come here to be more myself, Tony, than to work on that stuff.
Well, that's good. That would be great. I love getting to know people like on that kind of personal level because it's kind of who we really are, right?
Yeah.
I noticed there's one photograph of you where you're either hiking on a mountain or you've got the trail hat on. What's that? What's that all about?
Oh, that's more me.
That's what I
I,
thought.
I love to be in nature. I love to hike. I love to put my bare feet in water, in the stream or in the sea. I love to touch tree trunks. um, watch no, feel the rain on my face, watch the sky. That's more me. That's not a job. That's not something I do. That's just me being myself.
Back in the day, well, I still live in the woods of East Tennessee in my little tiny shack, but we used to run the Appalachian Trail on the weekends. And of course, it's not the 15,000 feet you're probably used to, but it's more like 5,500. But those were the best weekends I remember being out on the trail, scaring bears off and.
I've been in the Appalachians, and they are fantastic, especially in the fall. I mean, this is a
Oh
good
man,
time.
Today is my birthday. Happy birthday to me.
Congratulations, Tony.
And
Happy
this is
birthday.
coincidentally my favorite time of year when the leaves start changing. It's just beautiful up there in the mountains. And
Yeah, here in the Netherlands, it's less exciting the autumn because all the leaves that fall, they start to rot and they turn into mud, and it's a very flat, humid country. So the fall is not as beautiful, but 2-3 hours by car going to Germany, and then you have a beautiful fall again. And my girlfriend is from Germany, so we go there often. By the way, we will go there at the end of this week again. It's like a day trip or a weekend trip.
hmm. So what I mean is that pretty much what you do in your spare time? What are the other types of things you do in your spare time?
I like to build stuff with my hands because I study electronics. It's what I know how to do, but that sense of satisfaction of putting something together and then seeing it complete I find it's very exciting, and then I like to keep watching the stuff I build. I can show you one. There is one right next to me. Hold on.
That would be awesome.
This.
Oh yeah, I've seen a picture of this one. That is
So
awesome.
this is a very old style mini computer. Um, and I love not only designing it, but soldering, putting it together, constructing the thing. It gives you that, how to say, it is satisfying in an immediate way that philosophy and big time engineering are not, because you're not doing the stuff on your own. You're doing a small little part of something very big, and there are hundreds of people working on the rest, so you never get to really see the thing completed. And it takes a long time to see to see the results, to see the thing going and running, and building these little things at home on my own. Oh, that the sense of satisfaction is immediate, immediate rewarding.
That's amazing because about 25 years ago, it's about 30 years ago, before I started my design build company, Artists and Construction, um, I wanted to get experience in architecture, right? Because I knew if I did, I would be working with architects, engineers, all these different types of people. And at the end of a project, right? The project for architecture firm is that roll of drawings that goes out the door, right? We would have a lunch party, we would celebrate, and I would be like, guys, the building hasn't even started.
you
you
know
know, and it made me realize that I was there just temporarily, because I was trying to get experience, and I did work myself up to an associate level, so I was pretty happy about that. But I eventually ended up leaving for the very purpose that you just mentioned, is I had to be able to build something and see it completed, and that was the awesome part of it.
yeah, most people who went to university and stuff, they get used to working on pure abstraction, like seeing the blueprint at the end, and they celebrate that because abstraction is what they see. They don't get to see the whole thing complete. So you get used to that. Some people in business, they celebrate finishing a PowerPoint presentation. And it's like, what? There's nothing there. It's just baked air, as we say in Dutch. It's hot air. It's just a set of concepts. But that's what a lot of people do, and it's a funny world. In philosophy, you celebrate when you publish a paper. It's a purely conceptual thing, and that's what I do now. It's my world as well, but I need to have a foot grounded on real stuff. My girlfriend helps me a lot because she's an artist, so she's always working with her hands in her studio downstairs. So I visit often, to feel the smell of the paint and the texture of the impasto, and seeing stuff being actually made, a material structure that has been constructed and put together. And I think I'm the kind of person that needs this sort of grounding. At least I enjoy it a lot.
I remember the first time I tried to paint with oil. This was like, I think when I was in high school. I wanted to be like Van Gogh, and paint these abstract buildings and things. I wanted to be the Van Gogh of of architecture or whatever. And I remember being so frustrated because I did something wrong, and the oil would never dry. It was like I could never. I kept touching it, and before it was over, the painting was like just a bunch of fingerprints because I kept, and I was like, how do these artists do this? How do they do this? There's a real skill behind that.
Oh yeah, oil painting is tough. They have to blend the paint, so they don't wait for it to dry. Oil paint can take years to dry and cure
I found
completely.
that out.
Now you should try acrylics. My girlfriend paints with acrylics. They dry fairly quickly, so you don't need to blend and mix paints on canvas. You have more control, and maybe it's less glossy. I don't know, less romantic than oil, but it's much easier to deal with.
Hmm. Welcome back, Alexei.
Yeah, thank you. I was having trouble with my internet, so I just turned on my iPhone hotspot and works fine, you know. But I have an
5G. Huh?
acrylic painting. Can I show it off?
Yes,
I'll be
yes.
right back.
When I moved into this tiny house in the woods, I've got the slab poured Bernardo for my next little cabin project, but I'm still in this tiny house, so I have all my stuff stored in a storage building. Or I would show you that painting I had done in high school.
You still
What?
do it? You still do it, Tony? Oh, that's nice.
So yeah,
Let's
that's
see for it.
Neil
That's pretty cool.
Armstrong putting the American flag on the moon.
Mhm.
You know,
That's pretty sharp. What
Fantastic.
type of paint did you use for that?
a combination of acrylics and pencil. So I did a lot of lines with pencils, and then would do acrylic, and then do some shading with a pencil on top, and then I glossed the whole thing over.
I wish I had that kind of skill. I was born stunted for art. I mean, I can appreciate art, at least that I can enjoy.
That's one thing that I loved about architecture was that you had an excuse to use, rulers and straight edges and something to help you draw the line, because I could never draw a straight line. even my curvy lines were ugly. So,
My father was an architect, Tony.
really awesome. What was his name?
Walter Kastrup.
Walter Kastrup. Huh.
Everybody called him Kastrup.
I just bought. My family came out of the county of Clare, Ireland. The Griffiths are pretty prominent there, and there's even a little castle named Ballygriffy there. It's kind of funny. And so I found on eBay this old. It was the Welsh School of Architecture. I think it's what it was called. A student had drawn the actual building back, when they either maybe right after it was built or whatever. I don't know what year, but I found it on eBay and I bought it, and so I'm going to frame it and hang it in my tiny shack. I love those old hand drawn architectural drawings. They're awesome.
Yeah, I don't have the skill for that. I was fascinated by my father working, drawing things, and there was once he was asked to design a church, and he designed on the walls and the spaces, but he was having a lot of trouble with the roof. He didn't know what to do with the roof, and then somebody felt that the little model he was building looked ugly without a roof, so somebody put a handkerchief on top, and of course it folded on the sides, taking the shapes of the walls. And my father looked at that and said, "This is it. I'm going to put a handkerchief as a roof." And they built a handkerchief-like roof out of concrete.
I have that.
And I thought, this is brilliant. I mean, I just don't have this kind of intuition, inspiration, this artistic thing. Yeah.
Well, sometimes I think that's why maybe I became a builder, because I don't either. Most of the buildings that I build, I design, but they're usually with help from the owner or another designer, or you know what I mean. And I found that it takes a really there's a special skill and I don't know. It's almost like it has to be in part of your soul to be good at at that, like a Frank Lloyd Wright type person, or a Gary, or somebody like that. I don't know. They're awkward people. No, I didn't mean to say awkward. All the architects that I worked for were very eccentric, and they were, you know what I mean? You know how it's almost like in architecture school, there's a class on eccentricity or something. But as a matter of fact, Stroud Watson was one of the first architects I worked for here in Chattanooga. And I had this huge, this was back in the day when we had these huge CAD monitors, they were like 36 inches. And he would come in with a Sharpie, and I would have like a floor plan or an elevation up, and he would say, "Do this." He would literally draw on the monitor. I had to be careful not to touch my mouse because the scale of the drawing would change. And I would take a picture of the monitor, and then we'd have to clean it off with alcohol or whatever.
I find it fascinating. I find that people's ability to do these things, my girlfriend's ability to paint, is just it's so way beyond me. It's like, contrasting yourself with other people can be tough going sometimes, because other people remind you of everything you were not born with and you wish you were. I can imagine I have the same effect, to other people, because the grass is always greener, the neighbors, But yeah, I am particularly stunted in certain aspects. But
That's
yeah,
to me, that's sort of the not a catch-22, but the conflict between being like well educated in art and then trying to produce art. I've tried to put
oh,
my
it's very different. Yeah.
I've tried to put myself in that place where it's like when I try to design a house for somebody now, I'm too influenced. It's very difficult to be original anymore with residential construction because I'm a modern architecture lover, and of course they were very prototypical, right? There was a very archetypical, you know, it's very difficult to reproduce and then when you try to reproduce it, be original. I don't know how that to me would show the true skill back in those days. You know what I mean? When you could produce architecture and it was unique, had character, but still met that archetype, you know.
Yeah. I certainly can't do that.
No, I think that's why I became a builder.
It must be very satisfying to see a house completed, right? You started seeing empty ground, there was nothing there, and then you end and you look at that, and there is habitat, there is a dwelling. It must give you a strong sense of satisfaction that isn't abstract.
It is, and it can be painful, because like we're about a month over. This particular customer I'm working with now had to. It's a long story, but she didn't borrow enough money. I gave her an estimate in the beginning, and she thought she could, play the trick of cutting costs or whatever. So she had to get her loan refinanced, and so it's taken us an extra month. And but we're still remaining friends, and the whole thing's turning out really great. And in the end, you kind of it's funny how you develop these relationships with your customers. Um, I don't have any bad relationships with any of my past customers, and that's really kind of the blessing. Um,
So the
I
nicest thing, sorry, I interrupted you.
no, go ahead. I was just
So the
rambling.
nicest thing would be to build a house, your own house, right? My father did that at some point in his life. Well, late in his life, he died very early, but in his late 40s, he got to a point where he felt, I have enough now to build the house of my dreams, he thought. So he built his own house. So he was the customer and the architect. So he did it the way he thought was right, the way he wanted, no compromises, nothing. My mother still lives in that house.
Can I brag just for a second? I just want to show you one. Is it okay if I brag? Let's see. I'm trying to remove this screen share and then start another one. I just want to show this one project that I'm proud of, since we're on the subject.
I get to go next. I'm just kidding.
This was my last project where it was my personal house, and let's see if I can bring up.
Your personal house.
Yeah, this was my personal house, not 2 houses ago, and it's one of my favorite buildings. I know it's very simple, but it turned out really cool because the part there, the basement was my office and shop, and then the upstairs was the living area. And of course, I had these big doors because they were, I could build things in the shop and then bring them out these big doors. You could back the truck up to these doors. Of course, the lady turned it into whatever she did to it. The lady who bought it.
Oh yeah.
But this was my office there. Those were the big shop doors.
Oh,
I
can't see
can't
it.
see. Can't see
Yeah.
it.
What's that?
We can't see it.
Oh, what happened?
Something's coming. Yeah. Oh yeah. Now I can see it.
Yeah. So these were the big shop doors going into and there was my shop. They turned my shop into some kind of man cave with all these Christmas lights hanging down.
Oh,
And
I could use that space. All right.
yeah. And so anyway, not to toot my own horn too much, but this was one of my favorite.
You said it's a small house. You don't know the Netherlands. This would be a mansion here.
Well, but things don't cost as much, I'm sure, in here as they do in the Netherlands. We can probably build 3 times the square footage here as you can, you know what I mean, for the same.
Yeah, ground is much more expensive because
Yeah.
it's a small country packed with 18 million people, 17 or 18. I even lost track now. It used to be 16. I think it's 18 million now. Basically in a river delta, a swamp, a sandy swamp. So yeah, ground is expensive. Yeah, but a house like you just showed, wow, here it's royalty.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I built that house for around 360,000, and so I'm not sure what that would, uh, what size. About how many square feet you could build? A
Oh,
thousand square feet.
I don't have intuition for feet. I can tell you in meters.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For that
What
price,
would
you
that
could
is?
have
That 300 square meters? Is that?
yeah, you could have 150 square meters here for
Huh,
$350,000.
wow, wow.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and probably it wouldn't be, and certainly it wouldn't be a freestanding house. It would have to be a house in a row or a corner house, a condo. I think you guys call it condos. Most people here live in apartments or condos, and freestanding houses they're a lot more expensive because of the ground and they cost more to heat. Um, but they're small.
I'm always getting that comment when I do a video of a construction project on my channel. People are always saying, "Oh, you don't build them like we do in Europe. The walls would be 12 inches thick, and like
Yeah,
it
in
only
Europe,
gets
no.
down to about 40 degrees here in the winter."
And here it's double walls because of insulation. So
Yeah.
every exterior wall is in fact two walls with a gap of air in between. And the building codes are getting tougher. Your heating system now, it has to be hybrid. You have to use not only gas to heat, but you have to use the warmth of the earth. So you have to have piping going deep into the earth, circulating water, and all kinds of new regulations about double glazing, triple glazing, and whatever inert gases you use. So it's becoming pretty tough to build in the Netherlands. And
Mm.
young people, they can hardly get into the ownership market. Most young people cannot even dream to buy a house; they only rent. And the problem is, if you don't get into the ownership market relatively soon, you never get a nice house, which is something that happens after 40 years old, 50. But if you are a first-time buyer and you don't have a house to sell in order to have made already some profit over the years to afford a bigger house, you never get there. And that's what's happening to young people now. They can't get in, they can't put their foot in the door, so they will be forever renters, which is, Dutch culture was such that owning a house was stimulated, because when people own a house, they tend to take more care of it. They take more care of the street around. They care more about the neighborhood because they feel invested with a sense of ownership. And when people rent, they never know where they will be living in a couple of years, and it's not their house anyway. But that culture of ownership, I think, will be a thing of the past, not so long from now, and it's a tragedy.
Hmm.
That's
What were
already
you going?
happening here in Tampa, in Florida. The prices have gone up so much that like you're saying, only people that have invested in the housing industry from a young age have the ability. And you have to make sure you have the right credit. You have to, a lot of different things. More and more
Yeah,
challenging. Yeah.
it's a pity. On the other hand, the new generations, they seem to have a different mentality as well. I talked to some young people these days, and things that for my generation, I was born in 74. For my generation, things that we dreamed of when we were teenagers, like I want to own a car, I want to own a house, I want to have independence. They don't seem to be too hot about this anymore. I mean, my generation, we wanted to get out of our parents' houses as soon as possible. No, I left at 17. We wanted to just get out of mommy and daddy's wings as soon as possible. Now they're okay to stay with mommy and daddy in their room until, I don't know, 30. And they don't want to own a car. They prefer to rent when they need to or use public transportation, which here it's okay. In the US, you don't have that option, or have an e-bike, an electric bike. So their ambitions, their dreams have changed. They value more a sort of a nomadic life with no strings attached. So if they want to go somewhere else, they don't have to go through the trouble of selling their house and all that stuff. They can just pack and go, and they are digital nomads. They want to work from anywhere and have the freedom to just go somewhere else tomorrow if they feel like it. So it's different as well. It's not only that the market is becoming tougher, but the dreams of the Zoomers are changing as well, I think. Maybe I'm hallucinating. I don't know.
No, I've witnessed this too, and it's really tough as a parent, because like I had my youngest son Alex, who actually may call and wish me happy birthday during this. It's kind of funny, but if he does, I'm gonna let you say hello to him because he's a fan. I showed him the board, the little retro board you were building, and he thought that was awesome. And he's actually getting ready to take his one of the IT certifications. It's not the Microsoft one, but it's another one. I don't. There's apparently a lot of different ones now. So he wants to go into uh, hardware, software, IT stuff. He doesn't really know yet. He's still at that age. But what brought that up was that it seems like as parents we've become softer too, right? Because I remember I let him live with us as long as he wanted to until he went to college, and then when he came home, he lived with us for a while too. And it's like you don't want to kick your kid out. But I remember, I left when I was 17 also from home. But something has happened where we don't encourage our kids like I was encouraged when I was, I actually, I wanted to be a builder when I was like a kid, right? I had Lincoln logs and, I had all this stuff and I planned, I went to a building trade school in high school, but all that stuff was encouraged by my parents and, get out and get going in life. And I don't know what's happened. I guess I'm acknowledging that society is changing, like you're
Yeah.
saying.
I think there's a heightened awareness of danger that makes parents worried about their kids going on their own. Um, Maybe, back in the 80s when I was growing up, um, m- people had more of a sense of safety, and maybe unjustified. Maybe they just didn't get the news, so they didn't
Yeah.
know. But we were stimulated to be independent. And actually, my generation, we didn't need stimulation. We just wanted to get the hell out. And now I see here in my neighborhood, kids in their 20s, Saturday evening, my generation, the last place we would want to be on Saturday evening is in daddy and mommy's house. Right? This is the absolute last place in the world you want to be on Friday and Saturday evening. The kids here in that, no kids, adults in their 20s living with their parents, they throw parties on Saturday evening in their parents' homes. And then for me, this is like mind blowing. It's like, what? Really? No. How do you even come up with that idea? But I don't have kids, guys. For I don't know whether there is any particular reason. I never felt like I needed to have, and it didn't happen. And today, my girlfriend is much younger than me, so in principle, we we could still have kids, but she doesn't want either. But if I had kids, I wouldn't be able to educate them the way my father educated me, because things my father stimulated me to do, or the values he inculcated in me, were such that they could be dangerous to a kid today. Like, I was educated since very early on with this notion that bullying is something you don't even let start, let alone endure. Now, if there is a hint, a vague suspicion that somebody is going to try to bully you, you end that immediately, which often gets physical. And back in the 80s, my father would say, no, worst thing that can happen, you get your arm broken, because jiu-jitsu was a big thing. And if you get your arm broken, I go pick you up in the hospital, no big deal. And then I thought about that and I said, yeah, no big deal. So I would challenge kids twice my size, 2, 3 years older than me, which at that time it was a big difference in age. So if they would even give me the least reason to think they might want to try to bully me, it's over then and there. And it doesn't matter whether you win or you lose the fight. The bully doesn't want to fight. If he realizes that to bully you, he will have to fight. It ends. It stops. Now, could I tell that to a kid today? Of course not. The other guy pulls a gun, pulls a knife, um, a rifle. And in my time, if you would pull a small knife on somebody else, you would never get a girlfriend anymore, because you would be branded a coward forever.
Mm-hmm.
Know what I mean? It's a very different world now. I wouldn't know what to tell a son if I had a son. How do you deal with the pressures of being a teenager? Social teenage pressures. I wouldn't know what to say.
It is strange, because I mean, you're talking to a guy. I grew up in the 70s, in the 80s. We had gun racks in the back of our trucks, and there were guns on them.
Yeah, but that's
And
for hunting.
right. But I mean, I'm just saying, you wouldn't today. People would kind of freak out if they saw, you know what I mean? And of course, this is Tennessee, so a gun is just considered a tool here,
Yeah.
But it's like you say, we would have never dreamed of. Well, first of all, back in those days, people just weren't as angry. It didn't seem like you didn't see that many fights in the first place. It just, people seem to be more, I don't know, I don't want to say mellow, but there wasn't there wasn't social media, obviously, to spread anger as quickly, you know. Um,
Yeah. I had my fair share of schoolyard fights. Maybe I had an attitude. I don't know, but I was never a member of a group, of a gang. I was too individualistic to be part of a gang. And then when you are not part of one, you are seen as a soft target. So when somebody is entertaining ideas of your being a soft target because they don't know you yet, you have to present your visit card very quickly. If you know what I mean. And yes, my father taught me to shoot. I was, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old, and there were guns in the house, but it wouldn't occur to us to use a gun against another kid. I mean, this wouldn't
yeah,
enter the realm of our imagination, if you know what I mean. The gun was against, house invaders, and a tool for something. It was not an instrument for settling disputes. So now this didn't even occur. I remember in the early 80s, having a small pocket knife was like the peak of the worst that can happen. Is the other guy pulls a pocket knife on you, and that would be pretty bad. The guy would never get a girlfriend anymore. He would be branded a coward forever. It was a different time. It's a very strange world today. Very,
mm,
very weird world.
Yeah, I grew up in martial arts style living. So, from the age of 5, I've always been in a martial arts academy. And the one thing that the instructor taught me when I was that young was your greatest weapon is your brain. And the best way to win a fight is not to fight at all, right? So the second they try to start fighting, well, use your words. I've had people break into a house I was staying at before, and I used my words, and they were like, we should probably just leave right now, guys. So I think with an educated approach to any type of conflict, it can be resolved, without violence. I don't think you need violence to solve conflict.
You
So,
had a much more enlightened sensei than I did. My sensei, uh, I was a kid, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, and I was part of the team that would go to championships. And my sensei, he was a young man, I don't know, 22, 23 years old, but for me, he was much older, wisdom and all that. But he was a crazy kid as well. I know that today. And there was one day after a competition, we were in the dressing room, sort of relaxing, it's over, cool off. And then we were having a frank conversation with the sensei. There were only 3 or 4 of us, not the entire class. And then he started telling us, yeah, you guys, your generation is a bunch of pussies. And then we were like, why are we pussies? And then he said, yeah, in my time, when we wanted to train for a championship, we would just go to the beach because it's sand, right? So if you fall or your opponent fall, nobody's gonna die. Go to the beach, look for somebody bigger than you who looks tough, and then you walk past him, and then you bump shoulders with him. You turn back and you say, what now? And see if you get into a fight, because that's the best training. And he was telling that to us because that was his way of planting the idea in our minds without making the suggestion formally, which he couldn't do. But man, in Rio, I had my childhood in Rio, in Brazil, and that was fight capital of the world when I was a kid. So yeah, beach fights were common. And the other guy, if you bumped shoulders with him, the other guy wouldn't know what you're doing. Everybody knew it. So yeah, okay, and you fall to the ground and you do the thing, and then at the end, whoever wins, whoever loses, you can tap. Tap was part of street fight culture as well, not only on the tatami. And you go have a beer together because everybody knows what's happening. It's training.
That's part of the culture of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, especially, right? Because Brazilian jiu-jitsu is considered to be like the upper echelon of jiu-jitsu, right? I mean,
yeah, it started from the Japanese jiu-jitsu, but they incorporated a lot of very pragmatic elements to it. And look, when I was a kid, doing jiu-jitsu or karate, it was good for your mental health. It gave you discipline, gave you something to be busy with physically. I was never a very physical person. I was tall compared to the local average. I was tall. In the Netherlands, I'm pretty average. But I was not a very physical person. So martial arts sort of nurtured that part of my life, which without martial arts wouldn't have been there. But I stopped. I went to university at 17, and then there was just no time to continue to do that with any level of rigor. You could do that then 2-3 times a week for a couple of hours. That's that wouldn't do. So I stopped and haven't done it since. But those early years in one's life are very seminal. So some of that attitude stays within me. It's part of my shadow side. That's sort of combative attitude.
Well, I think what that does too is give you an underlying sense of confidence. People that haven't trained and haven't been in, you could say, physical alterations, they don't have that confidence. And so when they see someone that looks a little bit different, they're going to have a lot more bias, and they might act a little more insecure and pace away or react by name calling or something like that. When you have confidence internally that you earned from martial arts, it makes you stronger. Like, things don't bother you as much.
I can imagine that's true. Yeah. Hopefully, I'd like to think that that's true.
I think it's true personally. Even what you were saying, the best way to train for a fight would be to go onto the beach and bump shoulders. Well, I don't think that really gives you your best opponent, because you might be fighting a guy that's never even trained in his life. But it gives you a sense of confidence, right? Because you can go out and you can roll with someone, right, without getting hurt.
Yeah. The thing is, at that time, it was not perceived as something dangerous to do. It was at best antisocial, silly, but it was not perceived as dangerous. And the idea of doing it on the beach is that you have a natural tatami. Beach sand is soft. Nobody's going to bump their heads on the curb and die accidentally, right?
Yeah.
The worst that would happen, and I can hear my father saying this, the worst that can happen is that you get your arm broken, and then I'll go pick you up in the hospital and it's all fine. And I was like, yeah, indeed, there is nothing to fear in life. And then I grew up and I realized there is shit.
Well, I did want to talk a little bit about a subject that I was curious about, but it's really more physical than a metaphysical. So if you don't mind, I was gonna I was gonna ask you a question about. I actually been enjoying our conversation about this, but I had this little thing going where I had invited people to ask questions. Only two people responded. Of course, I did it Friday, and so at the end, I was going to give an Amazon gift card away to the person, one of those people. So I have to answer. I have to ask a few philosophy questions, or if you don't mind.
Sure.
Um,
Shoot.
when I was growing up, my influence was my mother, who was like a sort of like a missionary. She would go on these trips around the world, and for the Southern Baptist Association, right? They paid her way. She would go, but she would come back and bring all these different, you know, she was talking to Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim. She was talking to all these different types of people, and so I got exposed to different philosophies when I was younger, and I became really interested in it. And the subject of consciousness always kind of came up, and for some reason, my intuition had me develop this idea that consciousness, and I didn't use this language obviously back when I was younger, but as you get older, you try to at least learn a few terms so you can communicate with people, especially like you, because you're the man when it comes to this kind of thing. But I had this. My impression was this, that consciousness was sort of emerged from a physical puzzle that as our as and that there was a hierarchy in nature, and that if you started from this most simple form of life and you work your way up to plants and animals and humans, that consciousness also followed the hierarchy, so that plants have a certain amount of, I don't know if you call it consciousness, but and then animals, I've had my pet dogs who seem to be conscious at some level, and then we're conscious on another level, right? So I formed this opinion, that it was based on a combination of physical and spiritual in my mind. But now I come to hear, in today's society, and I know you're a proponent of this, is that consciousness is not related to physical at all, or is there a connection? Kind of like what I grew up to kind of think, because, and let me just say one more thing. I did this little thing where I was trying to figure out what kind of connection there might be. And it seems like, we have DNA that's similar to animals and plants. Well, obviously animals, we're animals, but as far as plants, right? The structure of DNA is, so I don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always tried to tie, or I thought I was tying together the physical world and the spiritual world together,
Uh, you know, consciousness stuff goes together with physical stuff, right? I mean, if I feel very sad from within, I cry, and my tears are physical, and my contorted facial muscles are physical. So it goes hand in hand a lot of the times, and I think to deny that there is this relationship just goes against empirical reality. It goes against observation. Obviously, experience is tied together with a physical manifestation in some way. That's abundantly clear. I don't think anybody who is a serious you know player in consciousness studies or philosophy or neuroscience would deny that. The question is, what is the nature of that relationship? Um, a materialist would say, well, experience and physical stuff, they go hand in hand, because physical stuff is what creates experience. That's one alternative. The problem is that we don't have any account for how physical stuff could create experience. And apparently that lack of an account is very fundamental. It's not a matter of solving a problem. It's just a contradiction in the line of reasoning. The other possibility is to say, you know, physical stuff is what consciousness stuff looks like. It's it's it, it it's the appearance of experiential processes. The dynamics of experience appears to us when observed from the outside as physical stuff. So my tears and contorted facial muscles are what my sadness looks like from the outside. So it's not like my brain generated my sadness. My brain is what my inner conscious life looks like when it's observed from the outside. It's an appearance, an image. So that's the other way to put it. And then there is a third way, which is to say, well, experience stuff and physical stuff, they are fundamentally distinct, but they can interact. And when they interact, they join hands. So you would have consciousness stuff, which you could call soul, spirit, and then you can have the physical stuff, you know, matter, the brain, your body, and the world around you. And somehow they interact in such a way that one reflects the activity of the other. That's another possibility. It's dualism, but we don't have an account for how two fundamentally distinct things could interact with one another, because if they can interact, then they can't be fundamentally distinct. That's one argument against dualism. But, you know, to try to sort this out in a rigorous, you know, constipated, conceptually clear way is necessary because of where our culture is today. We have become a culture in which literal stuff and abstract stuff are now put at the altar. You know, the true reality has to be some kind of conceptual abstraction, or at least captured by some kind of conceptual abstraction, very constipated and rigorous. So we have to sort out this issue very rigorously and literally and say what is literally the case. Is consciousness and matter two different things that interact? Or is consciousness stuff just matter stuff? Or is matter stuff just consciousness stuff? These are the three alternatives, and we have to figure out precisely in a very constipated manner which one is true. And that's the game we play. But it's perfectly valid for most people that they have a narrative about what's going on that informs their lives, without it necessarily needing to be literally and rigorously the ultimate truth. It's just an informative narrative that it's close enough to inform our lives correctly and understandable enough that people can translate into their lived concrete reality, as opposed to some intellectual conceptual abstraction. From that perspective, dualism has served that purpose for centuries. Well into the Enlightenment, well into the early 19th century. You know, great heroes of the Enlightenment, you know, highly intellectual, you know, elite thinkers like Goethe, Wolfgang von Goethe, he was still writing that dualism is obviously true. And if you don't think it's true, then there is something wrong with your thinking. This is paraphrasing, but I'm not exaggerating. This is written in his autobiography. In his autobiography. Goethe saying that. And here is the hero of the Enlightenment in the early 19th century saying that dualism is obviously true if you're a thinking being. So it has served the purpose for the longest of time, but now we've become so constipated since the late 19th century, so obsessed with literal truth and rigorous conceptualization, particularly from early in the 20th century, that we cannot take things that are true enough serious anymore. It has to be absolutely true, or we have to abandon it. And I find myself playing that game. That's the game we are playing. But if I were to talk to people, say, in some isolated Swiss valley, which is one of my favorite places in the world, they don't need all this constipation. You know, true enough is just that. It's good enough. And if everything happens as though there were a soul and there were a body, and they're different, but they interact. And when you die, your body ends, but your soul continues. If everything happens as though this were true, then fine. It's true enough. It's good enough. No? But yeah, my whole life now became. I'm saying this in public, and I feel absolutely free with you guys to say this, but sometimes I forget this is going to be published to the wider internet.
It can
But
always
my,
be edited.
no, it's okay. You can leave it in. I mean, if I said it,
Mhm.
I'll deal with the consequences afterwards. But my life has turned into playing this constipated game. You see?
I can see that. I mean, you know, to some degree, I even expect the reason I was really enjoying the first part of the show was that you were being yourself and you weren't being, you know, we were talking about guy stuff, you know, and I think people expect you to come on and just be this top level philosopher, you know, buy your book, you know, type of person. And that's one thing that I like about you is that you can be real.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, um, it's when people, when I have new acquaintances, and people meet me not for a long time, and they tend to think that if you're doing something social and we're going to have a dinner, or they come to my place and we are going to have fun an afternoon, they think that I expect them to talk about constipated philosophy. Nothing could be furthest from the truth. When they are here, I want to talk about video games. I want to talk about
Mm-mm.
life, or my girlfriend's vegetable garden, which we eat from every day. Simple stuff, concrete stuff, normal, normal
You
stuff.
you know, one thing I have found hard too is that I want my children to think outside the box. I want them to learn philosophy. I want them to learn, you know, science. But I want them to understand that these are categories, or they're bits, or they're data points, or they're. It's not something that you have to live your life. It's not a religion, right? And so I've always been afraid that if I taught them too young, that they would, you know, if I said, hey, look at this theory about, you know, simulation theory, you know, which I think is, to me it's silly. I'm sorry, you know, but the reason
I,
I didn't
I agree with you.
the reason I didn't want to bring that up is because I started thinking about it. If I was a child, and of course as an adult, I think this too, it actually devalues our lives. This, you know, it doesn't. It takes away the value that I think our Creator gave our life. That He gave us this physical world to enjoy, and that, you know, we at some point we pass over to that spiritual world or being, but if this is a you know what I mean? There's all these thoughts that ran through my head. So I feel like that in some ways I haven't done a service by trying to encourage my kids to be more, you know, get into the more esoteric. But in some ways, I feel like I've protected them against
Yeah.
weird thoughts.
You have to keep perspective. I mean, there are so many people so lost in abstraction in our culture today, and instead of using science and theoretical abstractions as tools, because we are still very immature as a society, although we think otherwise, but we are still, in the early stages. We sort of took those tools and we turned them into values, and our ability to use those tools now give us a sense of self-worth, and it makes us feel better than the people who are not using those tools, and we start feeling like we are elite, that we are better, that we know better, and those other people, then they don't know as much, and we started taking that as a sort of a way to differentiate ourselves from the masses, if you know what I mean. I'm trying to convey to you the sort of ethos that I well, in the environment where I traffic, this is everywhere. You sort of live and breathe this kind of ethos. But because I was a kid that grew up barefoot stepping on the marshes, I I I, I I'm constitutionally unable to fall for it. It's just beyond me to fall for it. But the people who do fall for it, who think that they are somehow better because of their ability to use, high conceptual abstractions and logic and all that difficult stuff, they think they're better because of that. Those people, they will never understand, for instance, what's happening in the US right now and has been happening for the past 10 years. They will not understand why half the population are furious at these elites. They cannot grasp it. They do not understand that turning what is effectively a tool into an excuse to differentiate yourself and distinguish yourself from the rest of humanity is not only arrogant, it's very bloody annoying. And it absolutely justifies the anger. But I can tell you, I traffic in that world. This perception is just not there. It's not like they perceive it, but they don't want to admit it. It's not like they're being malicious. They're not being malicious. They believe it. They sincerely believe it. Their sense of self arises from this to a very large extent. So to put it in perspective is almost like to abandon their sense of identity, their sense of self-worth. And that's why this crap gets perpetuated, in which both sides sort of dehumanize the other. And I don't know how if we had a little machine that could take the soul of one person and stick it into the mind of another for 5 minutes and then put it back. If you could be the other guy for 5 minutes, make it 1 minute, you would come back with your eyes wide open and think, oh my God, now I understand where this is coming from. Yeah, but I haven't invented that miracle machine yet. Maybe, maybe one day we'll get there. Until then, people will not understand the anger, and that's a tragedy.
One thing that's occurred to me, I don't know, recently is that there seems to be a lot more theory happening than lab work. It seems like most of take you for example. You are building things, right? You're building.
That's not what I'm known for, but I
I,
try
I know,
to.
I know, but you at least feel the urge and the need to build something,
Yeah,
right? It
yeah.
seems like a lot of the people, especially those who hang out on social media, are just they do speaking events, they do podcasts, but what are their actual? I'm not trying to be critical. I'm wondering what is it that they are producing other than opinions, you know? It's just a thought. I don't mean to be mean or
No, no,
anything.
it's a very valid question. It's a question I'm confronted with daily because, again, that's the world in which I sort of I'm doing my thing. Um, there is, and this may be almost impossible for you to believe. Um, you can get so lost in abstraction that abstraction becomes your reality. And the way this process self perpetuates is that it comes coupled with a set of values that makes you think of real reality as, in some sense, inferior, crass, um, lowbrow, to use a term that I despise, but I'm using it precisely because I despise it to convey the ethos of that mode of being. Um, you sort of enter a very rarefied world of airy concepts, intellectual abstraction, and you lose sight of the fact that that isn't reality. It's trying to model reality. It's trying to construct a narrative in terms of which to understand reality, but it isn't reality. And there is the possibility that people just lose sight of the difference. And actually, a lot of people lose sight of the difference. And if you have a lifestyle in which you spend 8 to 10 hours a day doing abstraction, and abstraction is not only philosophy, business is abstraction. And even the business people who tell you, well, now uh, $1 million in the bank is no abstraction. No, it is. $1 million in the bank is a number in the digital computer's memory, right? And even if you had the banknote, you can't eat the banknote. No, you can wipe yourself with the banknote, but not more. You cannot live in the banknote. You cannot shower in the banknote. You cannot fall in love with the banknote. So even banknotes, bills are abstraction. And business life is abstraction. It's dealing with numbers, with strategies, concepts, finances, accounting, and all that stuff. So a lot of people spend 8 to 10 hours a day living in a world of abstraction. Then they come back home tired, exhausted. They know that they have to freshen up and be ready for the next day again, another 10 hours. So what do? They eat quickly in front of the TV and they watch Netflix, fantasy, more abstraction. So you never come across reality. Do you see what I'm trying to convey to you? And if you imagine that millions and millions of people are living like that, especially in urban centers, like in New York. In New York, a city I respect very much, but I would never, not for millions of dollars, live there. You spend your entire day in New York without coming across reality. It's all the products of abstraction. Fashion, it's abstraction. Cultural codes, ways of speaking, abstraction. Inventions, the job you do, abstraction. Invention. Often the way you relate to other people becomes almost sort of staged. You lose contact with your own humanity when you present yourself to other people. You don't present yourself unguarded anymore. You're reading from a script about how to look cool, how to present yourself in a cool way. And then you mix your sense of identity with your social media profile. More abstraction, more construction. You can really achieve liftoff from the earth with modern urban lifestyles. And that's what's happening. It's not malicious, Tony, and it may come across like unbelievable to you, as it was unbelievable to me when I was younger. But because my life has been in that world, I've come to realize that it's true. It's really happening. And it's happening at a massive scale. And people are not doing this maliciously. They're not bad people. They are as caught in their narratives as anyone else can.
You know, this
So-
can't, this plant, I'll go ahead, Alexei, then I want
I just want to say, if you were to extrapolate the abstraction for a couple more generations, let's say 5, 10, 20, 30, 100 generations, right, of humans, what does that do to our evolutionary path?
I don't think it's possible. I don't think it can. I don't think it's a sustainable path.
I agree with that. I don't think it's sustainable at all. And ultimately, those abstractions that you call Artisan and I have spoken about this several times. I call them delusions. They're somewhat delusions. Like I create an idea, now someone else needs to fulfill it, whether it's a product, a philosophy, anything of that nature. I call it delusion, and they take us away from being our true selves, right? And so, if you think about the evolution of the human, what it does is it disconnects us more and more and more from Earth every time there's a generation living in abstraction. And ultimately, that seems to be what the root of all the problems, not all the problems, but a root of many of the problems today, right? When it comes to cultures being able to interact with each other, even it goes on, you know. So it's like I like your answer where you said it's not sustainable. So you don't think it'll last 20 generations.
No.
You know, when I was when I got married late in life the second time, so you know, I'm 61 now today with my birthday, and so I have a 23-year-old son, right? So, but I was really nervous about having a child that late in life, especially in this century or this era, because I always thought we were on the downhill side of the bell curve of human evolution. And I thought, what am I doing bringing children who are going to have children who are going to have children into this, this crazy world? It was a thought that actually ran through my mind. And,
Our way of life it has become, I mean, not everybody's way of life, but the way of life in urban centers has become so profoundly unnatural that I don't think, I'm not even speaking about the body. I don't think the human psyche can stand this for many more generations. I don't think that's possible. And we are already seeing the writing on the wall, the epidemic of anxiety and depression and the use of psychoactive medication. We are medicating people into acceptance of a profoundly unnatural way of life. This can't go on. No, reality has to come calling. But what I would urge people who are grounded to do is to try to muster a little bit of compassion, because the people that are undergoing this are not malicious. They are victims just like the rest of us. And they may have values that make them come across as extremely arrogant. And sure enough, I think, yes, there is arrogance going on a lot, and there has been for decades. But even that arrogance is a symptom of something that is worth of compassion. Getting caught up on that web it is not easy. It can devastate a life. I mean, some people who you hear at some point in your life, oh, he committed suicide, and you go like, what? And you didn't see that coming. And then you realize that there is so much simmering under the surface. People are trying to keep it together, almost literally. They're trying to hold themselves together in face of a profoundly unnatural way of being, a profoundly unnatural way of life that leads them to reject their own humanity. When they see their own humanity mirrored in another person, they poo-poo the other person. And when they do that, they're rejecting their own humanity, their own origin in the moist and dark earth. Know what I mean? From the ground where we all come from. And that is worthy of compassion. So that's what I would urge people to do. Try to look past the arrogance that alienates, and try to make contact with the human root of that person, because that person is suffering. Even if that person swears to you, I'm rich, I know much more than you, I'm superior, and I'm doing fine. No, no, is suffering. You can count on it. Anybody living an unnatural life is suffering, even if that person is hiding the suffering from themselves. They are suffering.
I like what you said there, and I agree that I think that people are ultimately trying to be successful. And so, what is success? It depends on what you've been taught from childhood as to what equals success based off of which culture you live in. So, we all have our different visions of success, and we're all trying to fulfill these things. But and the words you use, they're all abstractions almost. Many of them are abstractions, because true success, and this is an opinion, I believe that true success is the ability to care for yourself and to care for children and to gather food, right? The ability to survive and actually fulfill your inner spirit. And this might be a little controversial because we live in such abstraction right now. But for a man, it's to have, for a man and a woman, it's to have children and kind of reproduce and be able to love, right? Take care of the person that's on the corner that's homeless. Like, if I were to be able to take care of them and to speak to them like a normal person, I would call that success. But since we live in such abstraction, you're supposed to ignore the homeless person. You're supposed to drive, right? And that causes internal suffering. And I think a lot of it's subconscious in nature. The suffering that you were kind of speaking on is subconscious, because consciously they think they're successful because they have a job, they have the money, they have all this other stuff, but they don't realize that they're suffering underneath internally, like what you're saying. So I totally agree with much of, yeah. Very, very cool.
But it's sort of like I'm just sitting here thinking, it's sort of like where we are, though, right? I mean, it's like we can say that let's pretend for a moment that physical real, the physical world is not real, but it's it's how we get from point A to point B, right? So we're dwelling in it, and we've convinced ourselves that we don't have any other choice. So it's kind of where we are, and you can't really dig yourself out of that rabbit hole, really, even if it were true, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, what we call
We talk about money. We can't, it's just money, but we have the only way to survive in this, abstract world is to have money to survive, and that hopefully you're going to share it with others, right? And you're going to help that homeless person, right? So
money is a means to an end.
even if the whole thing is abstract, it's what we're it's. I don't think we can break out of that that simulation if it is,
uh, what we colloquially call the physical world is obviously real in the sense that it's an experience, right? That we all share, and we share this world. What is the nature of this world? That's a conceptual question, but what we colloquially call the physical world is obviously real. What someone like me would deny is the notion that behind the colloquially physical world, there is a strictly physical world that has no qualities. That has no color, it has no melody, it has no texture, no flavors, no smells. It's pure mathematical abstraction. That strictly physical world, or rigorously physical, that is, I deny that, but I deny the abstraction. I don't deny the lived reality of the colloquially physical world that appears to us in perception. And of course, that's the primary datum of our lives, right? It's nature's given. This is a given. We are in this world. Whatever it is, this is our reality, and that reality is
But
natural. It's
I guess the
happening.
question is, people would that I see, especially on social media, is what creates the colloquial world that you're referring to. Is it our imagination? Is it our, or is it, because
I
you
don't.
seem to be separating the colloquial world from the actual physical world.
Well, to me, the colloquially physical is the actual world. It's the world
Oh, I
that we
thought you were
perceive.
separating. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
Now, for me, the real world is what we colloquially call physical, in the sense that it's what appears on the screen of perception. It's the stuff we see, touch, hold. The concreteness of this bottle, that's real. It's a felt experience. What I deny is the academic abstraction that behind the colors I see that constitute this bottle, there is a real bottle that has no colors, has no texture. It's outside mind. That I deny, but that's a theoretical abstraction. We don't experience that mathematical world, with free floating equations in a vacuum. What we experience is this bottle. This bottle is real as such as my experience. That's the world we are in, the world we have before we begin theorizing. And it's real in the sense that it is our experience of life, right? And that I think it's important, the immediacy of the felt world, where we live, the world that is our home. And I think that should take priority over the abstraction that the real physical world is one without colors. It's the thing that tickles your brain through your eyes to create the sense of colors inside your head. I find this absurd. Why would this world of qualities actually be inside my head? It's obviously out there. It's not in me. It's not inside my head. It may be in me, but it's not inside my head, right? It's outside my head. That's obvious. I agree with that. But that's not what materialism is. What materialism is all the colors you see, the world you perceive is supposed to be created by your brain inside your skull. And it corresponds to a real world outside your skull. But that real world has no colors, has no flavors, no textures, no scents, no flavors, nothing. It's free floating equations in a vacuum. I think that's an unhealthy abstraction. But the moment you say that abstraction is incorrect and the world of qualities is not inside my head, if you accept that through a series of logical steps that we don't need to go through the pain of elaborating on, but I can guarantee you, if you accept that the colors you see are not inside your head, the consequence of that is that your consciousness does not end when you die. And you cannot escape that arrow of implication. If the colors of the world around you are not only inside your skull, if they are outside your skull, then you don't really die. Now, I can write an academic paper proving this, but if you entertain all the conceptual abstractions, and if that's your job, like it is mine, you can conclude this. And then, of course, the people who never
Say
left.
it one more time. If the colors outside the world, outside and in the world, say that again.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I understand.
So let me give you a little more background, so to make it easier. The notion that when your body dies, your consciousness dies with it, is based on the hypothesis that your material brain creates your consciousness. So if your material brain dies, then your consciousness is not there anymore. But if your consciousness is created by your material brain, and the colors you see are experiences in your consciousness, because colors is stuff we are conscious of. We experience colors. So if your consciousness is created by your brain, then those colors, which are part of your consciousness, are created by your brain. And since your brain is inside your skull, those colors are inside your skull. So if you think that when your brain dies, your consciousness dies, then you think that the colors you see are inside your skull. But if you do not believe the latter, if you think the colors I see are really out there, they are not inside my skull, then you have to reject the original hypothesis, which is that when your brain dies, your consciousness dies with it. Because if your colors are not inside your skull, they are not being generated. If the colors of the world are not inside your skull, then they are not being generated by your brain. They are contents of consciousness that are outside your body. So when your body dies, why would they die? Why would your consciousness dies? Because it's your consciousness of the colors that make them colors. If you were not conscious, there would be no colors, right? So if you reject the obviously absurd hypothesis that the colors you see are inside your head, everybody would grant that, I think. Everybody who didn't study philosophy or got a higher level education, everybody who are connected with reality, they would reject that. Of course, the colors of the world are not inside my skull. And I agree with you, you're right. But the implication of that is that when your body dies, your consciousness doesn't. In other
Which
words,
is a good thing.
Which is a good thing. It
kind of goes along with a lot of religions. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I believe that, I was created by the Creator, and that consciousness is part of the soul that I was given to occupy this body. So why would I want my consciousness to die with my body, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
there is there is a bad side to this, and you may not relate to it because you probably have lived in reality all of your life. But I had a departure from reality at some point in my youth, in my early 20s, and the belief that when you die, your consciousness dies with it can be very liberating to a lot of us, because it frees us from the greatest fear mankind has had throughout the history of humanity, which is the fear of what we will experience after we die. So, in Christian terms, are you going to go to heaven or are you going to go to hell? And that fear is very powerful. It has been the most powerful emotion in the history of humanity. When you say that when the body dies, your consciousness dies with it, then that fear is off the table. There will be nobody there to experience the unknown, the
But
after death.
That's more of a fear for my consciousness to die with my body. I've actually meditated before and tried to imagine that when I die, nothing is there. That's more frightening to me than what happens if my consciousness lives on and I go to heaven. Because if you are a Christian, you aren't going to hell; you're going to heaven. So, you know what I mean? That darkness, that never coming back, that ending of reality or everything kaput it would be terrifying to me more than whether I was because I honestly don't think heaven. I mean, hell is like a physical, like we're taught when we're in Sunday school. I think it's just separation from God. That's enough hell, right? Um, so that's odd to me to hear you say. I mean, I understand it, but it's different for me to hear that.
Yeah,
That
because you are you, and I, I I I understand you because I know other people like you who are part of my life. Um, so now I'm going to try to do the opposite thing. I'm going to try to give you a glimpse into another reality that's not yours, and for you, it's probably hard to envision.
that's why I asked you to come.
No, I get what you're saying too, and for me, I'm almost kind of, but again, I'm me. I'm not someone else, right? But I would say that knowing that if I die, that's it. That would limit the risk that I take. I wouldn't be so willing to go scuba diving 100 feet deep, and things like that because I could die if I did that. But if consciousness exists eternally, then you can do those kinds of things because when you die, you still live on. So for me, it's a reduction of risk. I don't know though. Yeah.
But what
I
were you
also
going
do
to
that.
say? But what were you going to say, Bernardo?
Yeah,
You said you were going.
just a brief comment. I also like to dive to 100 feet, and I've put my dive computer into the silt at the bottom and did a head spin. So I know that world. I enjoy that too. Um, I know what you're saying is true because there are people like that in my life, and in my early life, the family of my mother was like that, practicing Catholics. Um, but most of my life, I've lived amongst people who take this liberation from the fear of what we will experience after death. They take this liberation for granted, and that has the effect of um, lifting the feeling of responsibility that one otherwise would have for having a good responsible life or a righteous Christian life, matter of terms. You can choose your favorite terms. It 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 gives you what a Czech writer who won the Nobel Prize in Literature, Milan Kundera, he described it as the unbearable lightness of being. In other words, life becomes light because when you're dead, you're dead, and there will be no final accounting. There will be no final judgment. Your life is not invested with the weight of responsibility, so it becomes light, like a leaf in the wind in the autumn. But that lightness is unbearable because it turns it makes life meaningless and banal. And a lot of Western life, especially in urban centers, is a notion of banality. And that lightness of being is so unbearable, so profoundly unbearable. Um, and that's the price we pay for being liberated from the fear of what we will experience after death. It's so unbearable that the way we react to this is by engaging into constant patterns of addictive behavior. And by addiction, I don't mean only substance addiction like cigarettes and alcohol. I mean addiction to reality TV, addiction to buying the next pair of shoes, addiction to sex. It's a big one, big one. Addiction to power, addiction to money. There are all kinds of patterns of addiction that are unnatural, unhealthy, but serve the short term purpose of taking our eyes off the meaninglessness and banality of living a life in which there is no greater purpose and no responsibility arch. And so that's the price the Western mind has been paying since about middle of the 19th century. Nietzsche was the first Westerner to realize this and ring the siren and issue the alert. He predicted that there would be a generation of people he called the last man, who would know nothing other than banality, and it would be our own fault because we killed God. That these are Nietzsche's words, and God's blood is in our hands. Our hands are bloody, and we are the last man. His prediction 150 years ago turns out to be true. We are the last man, at least in urban centers in the Western world. And now the Western world, has contaminated the entire world with its value system. So, Seoul in Korea is the Western world as well. So is Tokyo in Japan. Thailand is Western, and it's everywhere. South America is Westerner. That's the price we are paying for lifting the responsibility and lifting the greatest fear of humankind out of our shoulders. Now, you may not be able to relate to that. For you, the fear of annihilation speaks louder than the fear of what you experience after death, because one of them you take for granted. You'll be with God. You'll be in heaven. You take that for granted, so you can't relate to the fear of those who are not sure about it at all, who just don't know what might happen. So for you, you can't relate to it because you take its opposite for granted. But it works the other way around as well. For a lot of people who have grown up in an environment that is atheistic, an environment where banality and meaninglessness are not maliciously but sincerely taken for granted and as just the way life is, it's impossible for you to relate to the fear they would have if they for a moment could actually believe in the possibility that there would be someone there to experience what happens after you no longer have a body. And that can be a catastrophic, paralyzing fear, so paralyzing that any addictive behavior is better than to contemplate it.
What somewhere in there was there what you think happens when we die?
I think we are right there to experience the entire process. And I fear death.
No, I mean after you die, you don't think that your soul or your consciousness lives on?
I think it does.
Okay.
I
Isn't that more comforting though to know that even if the way I look at it, I'm not actually like that great of a Christian, right? I believe in evolution, I believe in a lot of science that, I would get in trouble for in Sunday school. But, I've always looked at Christianity as a philosophy of how to live your life, do unto others as you would do, you would have them do unto you, just how you treat people, how you approach people. I believe Jesus was a real person that walked the earth. It's not like I'm anti-Christ or anything. But so I guess what I'm trying to say there is that if if the Hindus are right or the Buddhists are right, it wouldn't bother me, because at least, if they're correct, I may be reincarnated, even if I don't get to go to heaven, right? So these are nice, and maybe this is why, I don't know. Sometimes I think people are right. Religions were created to, control the psyche of people, or to give them, something, some sort of hope in life, so that they, they don't riot and crash out storefronts, So I'm not the best Christian, but this is my son. He's calling to wish me happy birthday. Do you mind saying hi to him, Bernardo?
What's his name?
Alex. Hold on.
Hey, Alex.
Hey. Hold on.
Hey.
Can you say hello to Bernardo?
Oh, hey, Bernardo.
Hey, Alex. Good to hear from you.
Hey, how are you?
Can you hear him?
Yeah, I can hear him a little bit. Happy birthday.
Thank you, son. Thanks for.
Am I live right now?
Yeah, sorry. I thought I would play a
Yeah,
trick
it's okay.
on you.
That's okay. I just,
I invited Alex to be here, and he was like, "No, I have to work." He works.
yeah, I just about to go to my lunch break. So,
Are you making
See
those
you,
top
guys.
secret chipsets there at Tech?
Yeah, don't talk about it.
Don't talk about it.
Yeah, that's a secret.
I want you to meet Bernardo someday, though. He's the maker of that
yeah.
board I was showing you.
Yeah. I'd love to sometime. I don't know if I'll get on the actual show or anything.
I know.
Maybe just get on a call or something. But
all right. Well, I love you, son, and thank you.
I love you too. Yeah.
Thanks for calling and wishing me happy birthday.
Yeah. Good luck with the show.
Thank you.
You're having fun.
See you.
That's nice.
I tricked him. He wouldn't come on the show.
So,
I wanted
Bernardo,
him to
it's
meet
possible to live.
you. No, I'm
I
sorry.
had a quick question. So, do you think it's possible? All right. So, you've got me thinking a lot about the word abstraction now, because I think you use abstraction the way I used the word delusion. So, do you think it's possible to live without abstractions?
I don't think so. No, we are deluded animals. Look, abstractions can be useful. They allowed us to put a man on the moon, which I believe happened because it's not as complicated as people tend to think it is. Abstraction they have given us cures to a number of diseases. So abstractions can be useful because sometimes nature behaves as though the abstractions were true. And that's all we need. That's all you need. But to think that the abstractions of humans who have been around for not very long at all on this rock capture reality as it actually is in itself, that's total delusion. So, and I don't think we can live without the delusion. We always need some kind of narrative in terms of which to relate to the world. And sometimes those narratives are useful. They are close enough. Nature behaves as though they were true. And that's all we can hope for. And that's probably enough for most purposes. Even religious abstractions are probably close enough for most purposes. I mean, just think about this. Who is closer to the truth? The one who thinks that there is nothing to us but the physical body, and when the body dies, it's all over? Or the one who thinks there is an immortal soul that inhabits the body, and when the body dies, you keep on living a conscious life in another realm? I would argue to you that although both are abstractions, one is closer to reality than the other, and that's all we need. There is something to be said about embracing certain abstractions, embracing certain delusions, so long as you are aware of what you're doing and how far you can take it. Because if you understand the useful delusions that are closer to the truth than the other possible delusions, if you understand that you're picking that one because it's closer to the truth, but it's not necessarily the literal truth, if you understand that, you have a meaningful, satisfying, productive life, but you will never become a fundamentalist. Because the fundamentalist is the guy who takes a useful abstraction and then says, this is no abstraction at all. This is the actual thing. And that's the fountainhead of intolerance, of lack of empathy, of exaggerated righteousness and alienation. So
And
there is some
killing God, right?
say it again.
Well, and also the abstractions are how we kill, you could say, God, but at the same sense, religion is also somewhat of an abstraction, right? So I get that.
Well, we need a language in terms of which to talk to each other and ourselves about the things that matter. So, and we are the one creature on this planet that has the ability to think symbolically. In other words, to think of reality in terms of little symbols, concepts, to replace reality with concepts. So if I talk about a tree, I can be talking about squiggles of ink on paper, where the word tree is. I can be talking about the sound tree, which is a set of frequencies of air pressure oscillations, or I can be talking about that thing in the backyard. So we replace reality with symbols, and that allows us to think in a much more effective way than other creatures who are constantly in the present and only have reality. They cannot abstract symbols away from reality in order to operate on those symbols and then bring it back to reality. So that's a power that nature invested us with, God invested us with, and not the rest of nature. And and it, I think the most productive way to deal with it is to think of it as a gift. But it's a gift that ought to be used with a lot of care, um, because it can lead us astray.
You took my mind down to a place I was having a hard time getting back. But I was just sitting here thinking that I can kind of get I kind of understand where people who kind of run societies, you know, let let what they think are myths, such as religion, dwell or propagate, because they give people a social structure. I remember when I was a child, we would go to church, we had a youth group, we had, we would do things, wholesome things. you know, we had hope about life. We were taught to be productive. The whole system of philosophy of religion is a productive one, I think, and so I've always thought it didn't hurt, and I never wanted to be a fundamentalist, as at anything really, so I became sort of Christian light. I followed the philosophy, but I didn't feel like I had to proselytize. It's not my job to. A lot of people in the Christian church think it's our duty to go out and convert people. I never really thought that. So
You
these are
can
the
probably,
thoughts. These are the things that were going through my head as you were speaking. Sorry.
I,
Yeah.
I think the loss of religion in the West is perhaps the very greatest loss we've had over the past century and a half. And when I say that, I don't mean to deny the abuses of religious institutions, but I would make a clear distinction between religious institutions like the Vatican, who are responsible for some of the most heinous crimes in the history of humanity, but differentiate the institution from religion. And even to say that religion is just a philosophy, I think sells it too short. I think there's a lot more to religion than philosophy. There is a lot of religious intuition, religious experience, and these things are far above conceptual philosophy. But I think it should be possible, although we haven't managed it yet, it should be possible for us to assign responsibility where it's due, like the history of the Catholic Church and the evils it has committed, and acknowledge that and assign responsibility for that without having to throw the baby with the bathwater and denying religion just because a institution that had as a mission to foment religion was responsible for whatever it was that they were responsible for. And I think maintaining this relationship with religion above and beyond a relationship with institutions is something we will have to learn how to do, because otherwise it's the unbearable lightness of being. It's the world of banality, meaninglessness, and addictive patterns of behavior. I mean, who wants that, right? The people who are stuck in that just don't know better. If they knew better, they would jump out of that ship. It's not a good place to be in. And true religion, it is the antidote for this. Has always been the antidote for banality and meaninglessness. And there is no point in throwing away the antidote, I think. I try to have a personal relationship with religion. My girlfriend is Orthodox Christian, not a fundamentalist at all, but Orthodox symbolism is what she relates with most. And one room in our house is almost an Orthodox church. It's completely decorated with Orthodox symbols, and I enjoy spending time there, just being in the presence of that symbolism, and that is above and beyond whatever responsibility I assign to the Orthodox churches around the world. I can tell you with all honesty that I think the Russian Orthodox Church today is criminal. Is responsible for the instigation of heinous anti-Christian crimes. But I will not make orthodoxy co-responsible for it. Orthodoxy as a way of being in the world, as a message of transcendence inherent in the fabric of reality. I'm not going to deny that, because some people running an institution have made horrible mistakes. But most people tie one thing to the other and throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think that's one of our tragedies today. You do not need to believe in religion literally, especially because it was never meant that way. When our greatest treasures, like the books of the Bible, when they were written, the concept of literal truth didn't exist. So they couldn't have written that as literal truth, because the very idea didn't exist. People always communicated through analogy, like saying time is a river, my favorite example. When people said that, of course, they didn't mean that time is literally a river, because obviously time is not a river, right? Time is not made of water, and it's not flowing in a jungle somewhere. What they mean is there is something about time that is the same as something about a river. But it takes too long to say this. There is something about time that is the same as something about the river. It takes too long. So just say time's a river. And that's how people communicated throughout history up until the Enlightenment in the 16th, 17th century. In other words, yesterday, it just happened in Europe a couple of centuries ago. So if you don't read scripture or the tenets of religion too literally, which was not the spirit that their profoundly deep writers had in their mind, you can be religious in a way that transcends whatever other human beings do, whatever heinous things they do, whatever irresponsible things they do, whatever institutions do. You can maintain that link with transcendence, because that's your birthright. That's the fountainhead of your very being. That's where you come from. That's what you're linked to at all times. Why would you deny that? Because other people screw up. People are screwing up all the time. We are screwing up all the time. That's also a powerful message of Christianity. Think twice before throwing the first stone. Look at your own closet first, and that's the stimulus for compassion. So yeah, sorry for rambling, but
no, it's interesting. I have to chastise Vlad here. I think that's his name. I'm not picking on you, Vlad, but this is sort of the egocentric attitude of to say that it's what it's easy not to actually scrutinize or question the true nature of reality. Most herd-like folks. This is sort of the arrogance that we were talking about early.
Yeah.
Early on, is that I don't think anybody actually understands the true nature of reality. So some people may just avoid or avoid scrutinizing it, or even talking about it at all. That seems to be like 80% of humanity.
Oh, hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Well,
Oh,
I mean,
God,
I
no.
talked to so many people who don't know who haven't heard any of these discussions on. I've had these discussions many times on my channel, and the people I actually know have never even seen them or thought about them or talking about philosophy or physics, or they just live their daily lives. They're just trying to get through. They're living in that what they think is reality. That they have to work and make that cash. You know what I mean, and go through that. And so,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying those are the people I'm talking about, where they're not herds. They're humans living their lives as they thought, as they think they should, and
No,
I just think it's a bit cruel,
I think where that's coming from, and I don't want to sound or to be guilty of patronizing the commenter, because I'm about to accuse someone of patronizing, accuse a group in society of being patronizing. So I don't want to be guilty of that myself. That would be self-defeating. But there is a possibility, let me put it this way, there is a possibility that where that comment came from is a place where one is disconnected enough from the ground of reality that the only ground one has to stand on is a narrative of self-identity and self-worth. There is nothing else for one to stand on, because that person is disconnected from the ground of reality. Now, to maintain and nurture that sense of self-worth and self-identity, that process requires a contrast. In other words, you are only worthy insofar as you can compare yourself to people you consider to be less worthy. And it's from that contrast that you derive the ground where you stand on, the meaning of your life, the meaning of your being, and the worth of your life. So you have to patronize, dismiss, and poo-poo a bunch of other people in order to be able to look in the mirror at the end of the day and say, you, sir, you are worth of being alive. Now, when you are connected with reality, the very thought of perhaps not being worthy of being alive never comes to you. It never occurs, because you're standing on solid ground. The question doesn't come. So I am notoriously someone who can get angry at people. I got angry the other day. So I'm not an enlightened person. I'm not a saint. I'm none of that. But insofar as we are trying to be Christians, I think it is worthwhile to try to regard that comment with compassion. Try to understand where it's coming from. And it's coming from a place that I have visited many times. And it is not an easy place. It's tough.
Were you talking about the interview with the fella on tow? When you
Oh
said
yeah,
you
yeah,
got,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
The attempted debate with team modeling. He pissed the hell out
I
of me.
think you had I watched that, and I think you had you were justified to certain to most of the degree that you handled that, because that's part of the arrogance I'm talking about, right?
Yes,
That kind of
yes.
drives me crazy about the philosophy and the science industry or world, or however you want to refer to it. That that was
Yet that's
I
the
think you
world.
handled it like a true human would have handled it.
I that world is the world where I have to do my thing. I have to do my job. And it's not. It's what nature's trying to do through me, and I'm mature enough to sort of surrender to that and allow it to happen. It's to some extent a world that is alien to my early self, my child self, my natural self, but it's the world where I have to traffic, where I have to do my thing. So what my emotional reaction to that was not constructive. I understand why you recognize it, and you saw in me the expression of, not the anger is too much, the expression of the fact that deep within me, um, I really dislike the patronizing attitude of the elite. And that was revealed in a spontaneous, unplanned way during that engagement, which, if I were in complete self-control, I would not have allowed to happen, because that's the world where I have to traffic. I have to do my thing in that world, if you know what I mean. You can only change something from within. It's very hard to change it from without, from the outside, because the thing you're trying to change is armored and has erected walls around it. It's a fortress. the only way you can change it is by being part of it and influencing its dynamics from within. So that outburst by me, no, it was not an outburst. Outburst was Tim's, but my reaction of just leaving it and saying, I'm not putting up with this, was not constructive from that perspective, because it has shown my hand.
Well, but if you witnessed it, it seemed as if it was just a de-escalation of a further argument, or you know, you know what I mean. It wasn't. I didn't see it as a negative thing. I saw it as I don't see this conversation going anywhere.
Yeah, but I could have used his outburst against him and wiped the floor with him. I could have shown that his appeal to evidence and reason were in fact appeals to the antithesis of evidence and reason. They were basically beliefs, opinions that he's married to, as opposed to things he can argue for. I could have shown that. I could have completely wiped the floor with him. He gave me every bullet in the magazine to shoot back at him. He said, Bernardo, what you said is silly because Evereshian many worlds interpretations of quantum mechanics predict the experimental results. Well, yes, insofar that those interpretations predict that everything that can happen does happen. In other words, they predict nothing. They might as well predict nothing. If you predict everything, you predict nothing. So it was rich of him to call me silly on the basis of the predictive power of the many worlds interpretation. I could have turned it on him and wiped the floor with him. The same about his appeal to pilot wave theory, which was abandoned by its own creator 100 years ago. I could have wiped the floor with him, and I gave away that opportunity because I was pissed with his elitist arrogance that just poke me. Normally, I deal with that very cleanly. I stay cool. I stay on the subject. I stay on the content, on the argument. I turn things back at the people attacking me. And I missed a great opportunity to do that again, because something about his demeanor, something about his tone conveyed that archetypal, I don't want to use the word liberal because I think it's overused and misused, but that archetypal liberal elitist arrogance, dismissive arrogance, you know what I mean? And how it pisses me. Yeah.
Has there been any conversation about redoing or having a do-over, or?
Oh, I think it's too late now for that.
It is funny how you come to a point where you just lose that ability to meet with the mind, right?
Yeah.
I've had several people, especially on social media, that I have been able to reconcile with, but there's a couple that just I have made attempts to reconcile with, and there's no connection there to make the connection.
Yeah, I think it's important that we always remind ourselves of everybody else's humanity. I think that's critical. So I try to do that with team modeling too. He suffers like everybody else, like the rest of us, but I don't think an engagement would be productive after that spectacle. I don't think there is a path to recover from this. Maybe when both of us are older, 10, 15 years from now, and there is more baggage and life softens us a little bit more, because life softens everybody, right? If you live long enough, life softens you. So maybe it will soften the both of us, and his New Yorker attitude will mellow a little bit, and my own dislike for dismissive elites, even though you're talking to a guy with 2 PhDs who went to the most elite liberal schools in Europe. But yeah, I am who I am, and it's the way I was born. So maybe that disliking me mellows a little bit as well. It has mellowed throughout my life, so maybe it will mellow a little bit more. So maybe we can have an engagement 10 years from now. Who knows? Hopefully, let's hope for that.
I thought I had read your bio, but I don't remember what the universities were.
Oh, my two alma maters are the Eindhoven University of Technology, and that's where I got my computer science degree.
What was
Uh,
it?
Eindhoven University of Technology.
How do you spell that?
Eindhoven, EIND of data.
Oh, I thought you were saying it with an A, like Ein. It's
Mm,
Ein, not
Ein,
Heinhold.
no,
Yeah, I
Eindhoven.
got you.
There is an H in Eindhoven.
Okay.
The Eindhoven University of Technology, and the other one, it's called. It used to be called the Catholic University of Nijmegen. It's now called Radboud University.
Hmm.
Radboud is a important figure in Christian theology.
Hmm.
Radboud University. That's where I got my philosophy degree in the Faculty of Philosophy and Theology. Philosophy, theology, and religious studies. But my degree is in analytic philosophy. So in principle, disconnected from religious studies and theology.
Did you get your technical knowledge from just doing, like building
No,
computers, or?
I did study. I have a master's in computer engineering, and my PhD is still computer engineering, but goes more into heavy theory, computer science, logic, proving theorems and all that. But my bachelor's and a master's in computer engineering, electronics engineering. Electronics engineering first.
Have you
So
delved into the AI, the language models much?
not
Yeah.
the latest language models. I did AI. Between 94 and 98. I did a lot of AI, and then I continued to do AI on my own until the early 2000s, the early noughties. And it's surprising how little has changed in the theory. The theory is largely the same. We already were talking about convolutional networks back in the day. It's just that we didn't have hardware fast enough to actually do something useful with that theory. But no, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, backpropagation, perceptrons, all that stuff, pruning algorithms. We had all the theoretical infrastructure ready to go in the 90s. And it's largely the same still today. It's just that now people have NVIDIA GPUs. We didn't have that. We had IBM power risk stations and workstations. That's what we had back then, which for back in the day it was like, wow, I have the power of calculating God in my hands. Today your cell phone is thousands of times
I
faster than
remember
that.
my compact luggable 8088
Oh,
was
there you go.
I thought I was big time with AutoCAD on first version of AutoCAD. That was awesome.
I still
What
have
about
a ZX80, the first computer I had.
what is it?
A ZX80, a British computer.
Huh.
Uh, it's hardly a calculator. But I have a
An
hobby.
abacus.
I have a fairly serious hobby. It happens in that workbench behind me over there. I restore historically significant, rare, classic old computers for computer museums in Europe. I am entrusted
Wow.
with some of the rarest, most delicate stuff out there. And I love doing it because although it requires some technical knowledge, so you know what you have to do, it's not heavy technical knowledge. You're not designing a computer. And it requires a lot of delicate work with your hands, often under a microscope. And I love it. I do that 1-2 hours late at night almost every day because it grounds me. My daily life is in a world of conceptual abstraction amongst the liberal elites, which I'm not saying this pejoratively. The liberal elites as human as everybody else, and I'm largely a member of it. Regardless of my origins and how I really am from within, I have 2 academic degrees from big universities, and I wrote books and I write essays for big publications, Scientific American, and even the IEEE spectrum I'm writing now for. So I'm part of that too. It's part of my identity. I'm a member of that world. But being in that world every day, doing conceptual work every day, it can be exhausting. I need to sort of reconnect with the dark, moist earth. And I do that with computer restoration work, when they're dealing with rust, with old dust, components that haven't been made for 40 years. It's so grounding. It's in my hands, my fingers. I absolutely love that. I need it. It recharges me.
This image of me with a set of drawings in my hand, looking at it every day, thinking about how I was going to build it and not having the tools or the materials to do it would drive me crazy, I think. I don't know how theoretical physicists or philosophers go do their thing every day without the answers to do what they need to do.
I think it must be very tough. I can relate to it because a lot of my work is conceptual. But if I didn't have these outlets, like my girlfriend's vegetable garden in our backyard, when you can sink your hands in there and get dirty, or my girlfriend's art studio downstairs where I can go there and absorb the atmosphere, and restoring these old computers that the ancestors built. My heroes build them. And dealing with the past, with where we came from, with our roots. That if I didn't have these grounding things in my life, I think the lightness of being would truly be unbearable, like Milan Kundera put it. I don't know. I'll go nuts, or I would
What
float and levitate.
what do you do with the computers once you're restoring them for somebody? For
Yeah, they
for
usually
people?
go to museums. I do it for free because it's a hobby, but I don't do it for free for people who will then sell them and then earn a lot
eBay.
of money.
Yeah.
As I restore them from museums, there is one of the top old computer museums in the Netherlands is close to where I am, half an hour from my house, and I'm now restoring a extremely rare Belgian computer called the Die PC. I'm restoring it for a museum in Namur in Belgium. That's like 3 hours from where I am, which is for American standards, it's next door, right? It's very close by. It's still the same state. If
Yeah.
you're in the great state of Tennessee, you can drive 3 hours and still be in the same state. In the Netherlands, if you drive 3 hours, you're either in the ocean or you're in Germany or Belgium. But I'm restoring it for them. So I do it for museums, non-profits and museums.
You should make a video someday of you that kind of work. I think that
Well,
would
I,
be
I, I
fascinating.
did. I did. I have
Where
an alter ego, a secret personality on YouTube. It's called I call myself there the Byte Attic, um, just like it sounds. The Byte Attic, one word. Let me see if I can send you.
I had no clue. I've been watching you on everybody else's channels for so long. I never even thought to go and check out.
I just sent you a link to my YouTube channel on the
Here
chat
we go.
window. So it's just channel the Byte Attic, and it's me. There isn't a photo of me, but there is a caricature, sort of a caricature of my face when I was younger, 15 years ago. And I film these restoration processes. I also design little computers for educational purposes. Design them from scratch, from the gates up. So not assembling PCs. I'm designing 8-bit computers for educational purposes, and companies have picked these designs up. So there's one company in the European Union selling my computers, a company called Olimax, and now there is another company in the UK selling a video games console that I designed along with them, called Console 8. And I put videos about the designs of these things and restoration of these very old, very rare computers. And there is one computer waiting downstairs to be restored for a museum. It's a Q1 computer. It's an example of the very first line of what we call microcomputers in the world. The first one was built at the end of 1972. And there are 5 units known to be alive, and one of them is downstairs waiting for restoration work from me. And this links me to the ancestors, guys. I mean, this is not an idea that is part of, the urban world. In the urban world, people try to live as if we had no past, as if we had no ancestors, as if we had no responsibility towards those that came before us, that there is no link to a geography, there is no link to a past. It's like we are sort of floating. We were born out of a vacuum. But I have a very strong sense of connection with the past. I have a very strong sense of responsibility towards the ancestors. And when I mean the ancestors, I don't mean only my family tree. I mean my spiritual ancestors, like Carl Gustav Jung, like Arthur Schopenhauer, like Wolfgang von Goethe, like Kant, Kierkegaard, Swedenborg, and others. I feel a strong sense of responsibility to give continuity to what they were doing, to what they started, and with the grace of the divine, maybe even completing what they started. If I can be that ambitious. And I also, but I need to, I have this feeling, I need to nurture this link with the past. The older I get, the more I sort of turn backwards, and the more I feel responsibility for the past. So restoring computers is a way to honor my ancestors, my spiritual ancestors, not only through conceptual reasoning, like I honor Schopenhauer, Jung, Kierkegaard, and others, but through work with my hands, like bringing the artifacts, the treasures, the artifacts they left behind, bringing them back to life, giving them a new lease of life. So working with these computers is a way to link with the past and honor my spiritual ancestors, not only with what is in here, but with this 10 fingers. Jesus was a carpenter. He worked with his hands, and I think we all need a link to that.
Yeah, I think in America we seem to think that the only PCs that existed came from Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. To think that there's all these historical, computers that were built, it's just amazing to me. I mean, it's fascinating. I had no idea.
You can indulge in the videos I put in there. The Q1 is an American computer. The first microcomputer, the first desktop computer used to use a microprocessor was an American computer, designed by a guy called Daniel Aykroyd and his team. Daniel died a few years ago, but we got a lot of documentation from his daughter. So we are now sort of retelling that story, a story that got lost. We think, microcomputers started with the Insight and the Apple One. Actually, they started 2 years before all that, with the Q1 Corporation in the US. So we are trying to recover that story and honor Daniel and the others who worked with him. He was a tough nut, Daniel. He was not an easy person. The stories about him can be just as scary as the stories about Steve Jobs. But that only means that they were human and they had shortcomings like the rest of us, right?
How do you? I'm asking questions just from personal curiosity. What, as far as software, what programming languages are you familiar with, or that you use, or that you?
Throughout my life, C has been a mainstay throughout my life. I've always used C, but I don't mean that I still know how to use all the languages I'm going to list to you now, but at some point I knew how to do that. I knew how to use Fortran, COBOL, BASIC, Pascal, C, processing, and of course the Python, Java, all this modern stuff. I could program with that as well. But my mainstay is C, C++. That's what I was educated with. That's the tool that I was given early in my life. So it's the one language that if you ask me, sit down and write code right now, I would write it in C++.
That's
so I'm not very modern. I'm not a real Python guy.
That's too bad, because I was going to get you to help me. Just kidding. Now you know why I was asking. No, I'm just kidding. I'm trying to integrate this AI concept I have with this little website I have for the construction industry. Anyway, it's funny. So I was asking for personal reasons, but not to get you to help me. It's kind of
Oh,
funny. I know
we
you're
have
way
a
too busy
visitor.
for that, huh?
I have a visitor. Come, buddy. Come here. Come.
I just wanted to mention, I'll need to get going in about 5 minutes. I told
Yeah.
Art earlier, it's like the longest I can go for is an hour and a half, and we're already at 2 hours and 10 minutes. So
That's funny. Well,
But,
thanks,
look,
Alexei.
well,
He's here. He's here. Come here, buddy.
Well, it was nice
That's
meeting you,
Loki.
Bernardo.
Whoa, that's a huge cat. That's a big cat.
I find it wonderful, Tony, that when your son called. Oh yeah, take care, Alexei. Thanks.
Thanks, Alexei. I appreciate you coming.
Yep. Thank you for having me, Bernardo. It was nice speaking with you. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
It's been a pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you,
Have
sir.
a great night, guys, or great
too.
day. The artist, and great night, Bernardo.
See ya.
Take care.
Yep.
I thought it was wonderful, Tony, when your son called, and you answered it on air. This is a sign of. This is what people who are grounded in reality do. I think most other hosts, they would have muted their phone in advance, or if the phone would ring, they would just cancel the call because they are on air and you have to do things right. I thought that was wonderful that you just spontaneously answer the phone. I mean, this is so human, so real, so authentic. So I did the same thing. Floki came here and I didn't push him away. It's reality.
He's a huge cat, though. Or is that just an optical illusion, or is he really big?
No,
He
is almost 8 kilos, and he's not very overweight, so he's a big boy, right, buddy?
I was telling the story to Alexei before you came in, where when I was first dating my first wife, I was trying to impress her. I was living in an apartment and I got a cat because I thought that would impress her. and it was a Manx, the cats without a tail that looked like bobcats. And I was never there, and he became very mean, and he started attacking me one day when I came home. And so I gave him away. But so I never thought I was very good with cats.
I love cats. I absolutely love cats.
I like cats. I just think that I'm probably not good with them, but I think they're impressive. I think they're probably underappreciated. Like when you're comparing them to dogs. So many people are like, "Oh, dog's a man's best friend." But
I love dogs too. I had dogs most of my life. When I was a kid, I had multiple dogs. I love animals. I just love animals.
I think dogs require more attention than cats.
Well, you hear that often, and it's true in the sense that you don't need to walk your cats twice a day. Unless you live in the US and you have space, you don't need to walk your dogs. You guys have land. We don't have land here, so we have to walk our dogs. But cats, if they connect with you, they are not aloof at all. This little guy here, he is on my case all day. He's all day on my case, and he demands attention. He got used now to my giving interviews. He knows that when the microphone is in front of me and I'm talking, he's probably not going to get much attention. But other than that, he's always on my case. And I have 2 other cats, and they also need their moments throughout the day. If you connect with cats, most people don't connect with cats. I think the cat becomes just a sort of a fixture in the house, does its own thing. But when you connect, cats can be intense.
What's his name?
Floki. Floki is a cute children's name in Scandinavia.
Is that Flokey? How do you spell it?
Flokki.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, you can spell it with 1 K as well. Depends on the end. Floki. I would spell it with 2 Ks, but 1 K is good too.
Does that have a meaning? That name?
It's a contraction, sort of cutified form of Loki, and Loki is the Nordic god of mischievousness. That's Loki, the mischievous god. Mischievous, not in a malicious way, although Loki could be malicious, but in the sense that we used the name for this cat. It's a mischievous someone, likes to do little mischievous things in a harmless, innocent way, like a kid.
Hmm.
So that's where Floki comes from. It's softened from Loki.
How would you actually inspire kids now? I've really tried with Alex. So I had a selfish reason for, I wanted him to kind of meet you and talk to you. I've always been trying to inspire him to be to be interested in technology. I remember when he was 4 or 5. He's gifted. So I don't know if you remember, MIT came out with this. Scratch was like an object oriented software, and that you could just take little modules of I guess they were little modules of language, and you could string them together, and he could create video games or whatever out of those. Anyway, it was very it was for kids, helping them to and it seems like, but it seems that I've always thought there was something in our DNA that kept parents or the older generation from transferring knowledge to the younger generation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've struggled with this question, and I came to a tentative conclusion that I'll share with you. I don't know whether it's right, but I try to contrast what I see happening with the Zoomers today, the latest generations that are coming to the job market, and I try to compare that with the childhood I had. I mean, I had a fantastic childhood, having been born in Rio, uh, and having being a child in nature. My family had a property outside the city, in the middle of the forests, and it was fantastic. So I had a privileged childhood. Sometimes I look back at that and I wonder, did it really happen? Did I really grow up in that faraway land of dreams? And was it real, or did I just dream it? Right? Um, um, but based on my own perspective, when I was a child, my generation, we had a future when we were children. We had dreams about the future. We thought the world was very dangerous. It was the Cold War. We knew that the lights could go out anytime, but that only exacerbated this great hope for the future, a future in which technology would evolve so much. We would solve most of our problems. We wouldn't need to work 40 hours a week anymore. We would have a life of leisure, of philosophy, of edification, of religious enlightenment, instead of a grudging life of menial, banal tasks and struggle and suffering and shortcomings and poverty. We thought the future was utopic. That was the ethos of the late 70s and the 80s, that we were going in a wonderful direction if we only managed to survive and not kill ourselves in the process, that the future would be utopic. It would be fantastic. And my interest in technology came from that. When I was 6 years old, I got my hands on an early British computer made by Sir Clive Sinclair, very famous British guy who died 2 years ago. It was a very small, very simple computer, the ZX81. And of course, I had interest in these things, so I asked my father to help me crack it open. I cracked it open, and then there is a big chip inside that is the CPU, the central processing unit. And my father grandiosely pointed that chip to me and said, "This is the electronic brain of this computer." And my eyes just enlarged, and I was like, whoa, this is what I've got to do one day. And then I asked him, who made this? And my father had a subscription to Science magazines at the time. I don't know how he knew it, but he knew the name of the creator, Federico Fagin, an American Italian, who created that Z80 CPU when he founded the Zilog in 1974, the year I was born.
He actually
And
created the actual chip.
yeah, he designed the
Huh.
CPU. He created the chip at Zilog.
Wow.
Fajin created that chip.
Hmm.
And instantly, Fajin became a hero to me as a 6-year-old kid. And what I wanted to do was to do what Fajin had done. I wanted to create new computer brains, electronic brains. And sure enough, I did it. I got myself a PhD in processor architectures and compilers. And I designed processors. I designed processors that are now in Intel chips, in Samsung televisions. So I did that very early in my career. But that my motivation was this utopic future and the heroes that were building that future, like Federico. Today, I know Federico personally because he's an idealist. He has become a philosopher. My foundation, the foundation I run, is publishing his latest book. We work together. I mean, he is, when you meet your hero in life, it's a privilege. Most of my heroes are dead. Jung, Schopenhauer. Federico is an alive hero of mine. There's another one, Jacques Vallée, who I didn't meet yet in person. But these are my two living heroes. And all of that, to finally answer your question after all this rambling, forgive me for that, but that motivation, that interest in technology came from the sense of a coming utopic future and the heroes that were making it. And this is missing in the current generations. I look at young people today, and their future is dystopic. What they expect, I mean, I'll speak from a Dutch perspective because that's my immediate world. Young Dutch people, their future means that 40% of the country will be underwater, that maybe we can save Amsterdam, but no other big city. We will lose our history. It's impossible to defend our coast because then the Germans would have to defend theirs and the Belgians would have to defend theirs. We will be flooded sideways, so there is no point to try to defend it. By 2100, we will lose our cultural heritage. Maybe you save Amsterdam. And it's a future has only more climate change, more pollution. The threat of war is back. We are again in a Cold War, except that it's more dangerous now because there are more actors, and the chance for catastrophe is higher. AI is taking their jobs. They have no jobs. They can't buy houses, so they don't expect to be able to buy houses in the future. It's a dystopic future. And if you grow up in your early ages, in your early age, without a promising sense of direction, without the imagination of a wonderful future, it's very hard to be motivated to do anything other than survive and enjoy as much as you can now, because later you will not be able to. It leads to short-term thinking. It leads to the disinterest in making long-term investments in learning or long-term investments in a house or in other things. And I think that is the tragedy. The current generations, they have been robbed of a future. I had it. You had it. We had that in the 70s and the 80s. They don't have it today. So I don't know how to help your son.
And I have found it hard too to break through that dogma to sort of, it's almost like a trance that they're in. It's hard to snap them out of that psyche, that mentality, to get them to look outside of that.
You almost would have to change the world to achieve that.
Yeah.
And
So
I'm not a parent, but I wouldn't know what to do if I were one.
Well, I don't think any current parent probably has a good clue as to what to do. It's like we were talking about earlier. That it's a little depressing to think that mankind may be actually evolving. And that
I don't think we are evolving. I think it's just that we were never as evolved as we liked to think back then.
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. But there was utopia, there was hope, and now it's a very cynical future. The current generations, they look into the future. They look to the future as something that will only get worse, and therefore they have to make the best that they can right now. It's somber, it's claustrophobic, and my heart goes out to them. I despair at a few things in the world, some of them geopolitical and others very local, very human. Like giving perspective to current generations. It's hard for me to even imagine what it is like to grow up without the promise, the perspective of a bright future. I don't know what it feels like. And when I try to enter that room in the palace of mind, oh, it scares me. I recoil. It's like, oh no, I don't want to see that, because I had a future. I always had a future, and now I turned 180 degrees. Now I have a past. Now I have ancestors, and I will never lose it. I will always have a sense of direction. First half of my life, it was forward. Second half of my life, it's backwards. Not backwards in the sense of reactionary. No, backwards merely in a orientation sense. There are riches in the past that should be honored and given continuity to. So my life is invested with this constant sense of meaning and direction, and I despair at the thought that the young generations now don't seem to have it. I wouldn't know how to be alive like that.
I'm sitting here thinking that, well, even you've been an inspiration to me a little bit, because you've inspired me to try to finish my book I've been writing for like 5 years.
Oh, you should finish. Yeah.
It's called The Artisan Philosophy, and I'm trying to finish it before I can get it out in December. And you have been a bit of an inspiration to me on the philosophy side. And part of the book, it talks about mentoring. That the fact that we've lost our apprenticeships in construction, there's no mentoring. And I'm just sitting here
Yes.
thinking, we've also kind of lost that with just everyday things. Like, we don't mentor our kids or, the youth. It's almost like we've given them over to the social media. It's like we've
Exactly.
handed them over to,
Exactly.
and it's I just felt kind of a bit of guilt here, because here I'm preaching in my book about the construction industry, not, mentoring new carpenters and having apprenticeships for them, to be available to them. And then we're doing the same to all the youth, really, by not mentoring them through, by
There you go,
inspiring them.
Tony. You know what
Yeah.
to do.
What?
You're healthy, you're there, you have many years to go. Mentoring, especially in your profession, the profession of Jesus. Um, my father indirectly, maybe unintentionally, mentored me a lot by his presence. My father had a lot of hobbies. He used to build model airplanes, remote controlled model airplanes. He would carve wood and glue that stuff together, and I would sit and watch him do that. He had aquariums. He would try to reproduce tropical fish. And I watched him setting up those aquariums and going through the moves of the process of trying to stimulate breeding. He was a RAM radio operator. Before the internet, years before the internet, he would talk to people in Japan, people in Italy, people in South America. And so he would always have this equipment around him, antennas on top of the roof in a tower in our backyard.
Ham radio.
Ham
Yeah.
radio.
I know what you're talking about now. Yeah.
Sorry for my silly pronunciation. Ham radio. And he also had an electronics hobby. He had a subscription to what was the name of the magazine? It was not radio. I forgot the name, but he had this monthly subscription, and the magazine would come with these little projects for people to build. So he had this workbench, and he would solder stuff together, and he would make machines that produced all kinds of sounds. Once he made a little AM transmitter, very low power, but it was enough for us to pirate the favorite AM radio station of my mother and hijack it and freak out my mother.
Funny.
And I saw him doing all that. And although he didn't teach me how to build electronics, he didn't teach me how to build model airplanes or how to breed tropical fish. The mere presence, the fact that I was present while that stuff was happening, colored my entire perspective on electronics, and it brought me where I am today. Electronics became not something banal to me. It became a kind of magic that I wanted to master. So it was mentorship, not mentorship in the sense that this is a resistor, this is how you calculate how to bias a transistor. No, none of that. It was presence. And the presence of the mentor is 90% of the job, I think.
Oh, see, I do that in the construction industry. I have several young people I mentor right now. I have a my framing crew that helps me on all my projects. He has a son, and I noticed he's been helping me for 20 years now. I've noticed that I've watched his sons grow up, right? So they've kind of grown up with me and him. But I noticed that the culture that he was a part of was just like a labor culture. There was not really a mentoring as far as not a spiritual side of. I see a spiritual side of construction, right?
The
But
spiritual side of carpentry is very glaringly obvious. Yeah.
and because because of the upbringing that I do have, so and so all along, their names are Gabriel and Noah. I've been trying to teach them, because their dad is getting older now, and I'm afraid he's going to go back to Honduras on me. and I've been saying to them, here's how, you gotta, when you get ready, I'll help you get your license. I'll help you, and as they've been coming up, I've been teaching them about, tricks. But I guess what I was saying earlier was that I haven't applied that same thing to any other youth outside of I haven't applied the mentoring philosophy to youth outside of construction. And it's almost like we should develop a way to mentor just about life in general, right? And it's almost like you have to do it it's almost like would have to mentor other parents' kids, because my kids seem to have an immunity to my mentoring. It's like, oh, Dad, here we go again with this thing. It's kind of funny.
Well, they probably got something from you that
Yeah.
they take entirely for granted. But if they didn't have it, they would appreciate the value. I had an uncle who his hobby was carpentry. He was an army man. So his life was very different. But the way he grounded himself was carpentry. He had a large garden shed where he would build stuff out of wood. And of course, building stuff out of wood is the ultimate divine reflection, because you're building worlds with the material of life, which is wood. It's a living thing. So the symbolism of carpentry is profound. It's not for nothing that Yeshua was a carpenter. But what I got from him, he was my uncle. I didn't spend so much time with him as with my father, so I was more influenced by my father. But what I remember from him doing that work, it may sound funny to you because it's part of your world, so it's not special. For me, it was special. The smell of cut wood. It became magical. Like when you feel that smell, you're in the presence of something special. That's the association that I make. When I feel the smell of cut wood, worked wood, something flips inside me, and like, oh, I'm in the presence of something here. Because my uncle was an army guy. When I was a kid, he was a colonel, so he was like a respectable person. Know what I mean? And the smell of cut wood always came associated with the presence of someone superior. So that's what it did for me. If he were my father, not my uncle, I probably would have become a carpenter.
Yeah,
Most likely.
especially aromatic woods like cedar, and those types of woods that have a really rich aromas. When you run them through a sawmill and you take off that slab, and there's that exposed grain and the color of the wood, you almost feel guilty sometimes.
I never said this to anyone, but the thoughts are coming back. Another thing I remember so well of my uncle, he died only a couple of years ago. He was 90 years old. He lived a long life. He had very rough hands. The skin of his hands was very thickened because of his hobby. Because what he would often do, he would rub his hand on the wood he was working, sometimes to feel if the texture is right. But I had the feeling that he just liked doing that, and I could hear the sound of his hand uh, rubbing on the wood, and that would tell me what the texture of the wood was.
Yeah, it's awesome because you can feel the finish of the wood, right? You can tell whether the grain is raised or whether it's sanded properly,
Yeah,
or you can just you don't even have to look at it. You can just rub your hand across and say
I could hear it.
that's it. That's it. That's the
Yeah, I could
that's where
hear
we
it.
want to get to right there.
When I was a kid, I didn't quite understand it. I used to tell my mother, "Why is he caressing the wood?" I used to ask because I was just a little kid. But these are my main associations: the smell of wood and the caressing of wood, and the fact that you're building something with the material of life, which is, yeah, that's what God does, right? He builds things with the material of life. Um, yeah, I have lots of hobbies. I do lots of things. There are so many things I like to do. Wood is not something I did other than to help my girlfriend make the frames for her paintings. Wood is not something. Maybe when I get older, um, that's something I'd like to try. I'd like to try one day because I associate a lot of magic with that world, with those scents, those sounds. I don't know
Hopefully
why.
someday you can come to the States and visit my shop if I ever get it built from moving out of the
I
tiny
would be
shack.
delighted. I've been many times to the States for professional reasons. I've never been to the places I would like to be. I'd like to be in the South, and I've been to Austin once, but it hardly qualifies. But other than that, I've always been on the coasts, California, New England. Those were the places, and I've never gotten to know the heartland, which is one of my little regrets. One day, I see these movies shot in the south of the U.S., and you know that it's commensal. I don't know whether it's a fungus or a plant. Um, we had that in Rio as well when I was a kid. We used to call it old man's beard. It grows in trees.
Oh yeah, like in like Savannah, Georgia or
Yeah, yeah.
Charleston. Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
have it in Tennessee?
Not really. We have like weeping willow trees that sort of mimic that, but they're not the same. You know, they have the long viney limbs, that hang down. And you don't see those much anymore, but you have to kind of go to the south more towards the coast now, I think.
That's I'd like to do that one day because this is a memory from my childhood. But my childhood, as I told you, sometimes it feels like a dream. Like, did it really happen? Was I really in that far away land of dreams? And Old Man's Beard is part of that dream. So to see it for real, I mean, there is nothing like that in Europe. Maybe if you go to the south of Italy, maybe you get something similar. You can get cicadas in Italy, but you don't get them here. But the sound of cicadas and dripping old man's beards from old enormous trees. Oh, that is. I get.
That's one of
How
the
do you
field
say that?
trips that the
My
early
hair stands.
that's one of the field trips that Stroud Watson, that early architect that I worked for, I was telling you about, sent me on. He said, you have to go to Charleston. You have to go to see the alleys of Charleston, and you have to go see the trees. And so I took a trip to Charleston to see my old beat up Jeep, uh, to see the alleys. And because we were working on this project called Jack's Alley here in Chattanooga, where we transformed part of the city. We took out a few buildings and made an alley. We had to make an alley,
Wow.
and we had to create these balconies, and so it was very interesting. But I remember those. I didn't realize what it was called. Old Man's Beard sounds like a good uh, description.
That's what I remember. We called it. I'm not sure whether that's the real colloquial name. I don't know, but I have these associations, with the southern part of the U.S. Better than that would just be to go back to Rio, but I haven't been there in 3 decades, and I don't think I would be able. The places I miss no longer exist. I was watching the Olympics in 2016, and one of the rowing competitions was or was it swimming? It was on on a beach that I knew, and it was a fairly wild place back in my childhood. And when I was watching it, it was a wall of buildings, and I was like, "Is this even the same place?" So I know I can't find anymore my memories, the places where my memories took place. They no longer exist. But yeah, I haven't been there in 30 years, and yeah, the next best thing would be the southern U.S., I guess.
Well, when the Netherlands becomes flooded, you can move here.
It's our upcoming national tragedy.
Mm, mm.
We'll see.
I keep going. We used to go back to a condo on at the what was the island over there in South Carolina, Hilton Head, and for probably, I don't know, 20 years, we would go back, and I would always, look at the water level. It hasn't risen, honey. It's still where it used to be.
Oh no, it's
We
not
used to
linear.
joke.
No.
We used to joke about it.
But I know you're making a joke, but a lot of people, when they hear what the Dutch are planning for, they react just like that. They say, well, it's not rising, right? They expect the process to be linear, but it's not. The problem is, ice expands. Water, when it freezes, it expands and floats. So ice takes more volume than water. So ice that is in the water, in the North Pole, for instance, if it melts, it will not increase sea level rise because it will decrease in size. It's like you put ice cubes on your lemonade, and you mark the level of the lemonade with the ice cubes floating on top. And you wait for it to melt, the level will not rise, because when ice cubes melt, they become smaller, so it just compensates. And same thing with ice in seawater. The problem is ice that is on land. So ice in seawater, as it melts, sea level doesn't rise. It's not linear. But ice in Greenland or ice in Antarctica, if the base of the platform where the ice is holding on to land, if that melts, the ice will just skate, and it can skate to the sea. And then when ice that was on land, when it goes to the sea, then sea levels rise, and they rise very quickly. And all models indicate that that's what's going to happen. Ice in Antarctica and ice in Greenland, when they slide into the sea, when they begin to slide in large numbers, it will be very quick. And so the country, 40% of the Netherlands is under sea level, 2-3 meters under sea level. A lot of the land we have with major cities is reclaimed land reclaimed from the sea. And there is an entire, what we call the Delta Works, an entire network of dams and barriers that keeps the Netherlands protected from storm surges. But we already run the numbers, and it is impossible to continue to build those defenses up when ice starts sliding into the sea. It's impossible. And even if we could do that, the Belgians will not do that. The Germans will not do that. They would just move inland, but we don't have inland. The country is too small. It's pressed between Germany and the sea. So we lose half the land. And then there are projects for creating these enormous hexagonal floating barges where we will put topsoil, a couple of meters of topsoil, and we'll have pastures, farms, cities in floating barges made of concrete. There's a lot of studies, prototypes being done already. It's the only way we will survive. It's either that, or we will be refugees in Germany and Belgium. As much as we love our neighbors and we are super friendly with them, we don't want to be refugees in someone else's land, right? Nobody wants to be that. So we have to float half the country. And if you want to be successful in that, it has to start now, because by the time the ice starts sliding, it's too late.
You know what I think would help, though, is that, especially here in the States, it's too politicized. And I think if somehow we could depoliticize it and also open, from my perspective or my impression is that there's no public debate. And I'm not saying that public debate would change the story or the facts. I'm saying public debate would make people realize that if they saw their scientists debating their scientist, and there was some kind of common ground and understanding, then it would change. I think it would change minds. But there's this perception that there is no public debate, and that it's not allowed, and so you're always going to have this divide. That's just an impression I have. It's not
Well,
necessarily true.
you have the privilege of living in a continental country, a country the size of a continent that is bathed by two oceans. So whether sea level will rise by a couple of meters or not, short of the rich people living on the coast of Miami Beach, it's abstract. It will affect some people in the Gulf Coast, some people in Manhattan, some people in Miami. But the people in Miami and Manhattan probably have enough money and will get enough help to deal with it. People in the Gulf Coast may suffer again, like they suffered with Katrina. But it's in comparison to the dimensions and the population of your country, you have the luxury to think of it as an abstraction. We will deal with it when it comes, if and when it comes. But in the Netherlands, this is not an issue of political debate. It's an issue of survival. It's very concrete. We have nowhere to run. It's a border of another country. If I bike for 1.5 hours east, I am in Germany by bike and not e-bike, normal bike, biking at a normal speed, and so it's the sea to one side and Germany to the other, and half my country is under sea level. So we don't have the
I guess what I'm
luxury.
saying, what I'm trying to say is that just by me sitting here talking with you and hearing you talk about that, it's changed my whole perception of sea level rise.
Yeah, for the Netherlands, for us here, it's not abstract at all.
You're not an extremist yelling at people about their politics, and we need more people like you talking to other people on this kind of level to change minds. I don't think half the people who deny climate change are more denying ideology than they are actual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're against the ideology that's presented to them, not
and
the actual climate change.
and let's be frank, liberal science has lied to them before.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's coming from nowhere. But here where I am, where I'm sitting right now talking to you, we don't have the luxury to turn it into an ideological debate. And for us, it's like, if you're a young person, you are in your early 20s, everything you call home may not exist by the time you're 50. You're not even old yet. And we know that if there is something that can be done about it, it's something that will take decades. So the time to start is right now. We don't have the luxury of having an ideological discussion about whether it's real or not. We have to put our heads down and do the work if we want to survive as a nation. A lot of our history in Den Haag, in Leiden, will probably be lost because those cities are not defendable. But we will move 80% of the population to the east and the south.
I guess you can't do like the Chinese and just create artificial land around.
Well, we did that, and we reclaimed a lot of land that was sea in the IJsselmeer. It's a sort of it's an inlet of the sea that goes inland. And it's shallow. It's only a few meters, and cities were built there. That land has been reclaimed for the past century. But if a little bit of the ice, the models have been computed by the universities here, by other institutes, a little bit of the ice from Antarctica and Greenland sliding into the sea, and there's no defense. Can't defend it. It's not only economically inviable, it's not feasible, it's not practical. The Germans would have to invest proportionally the same amount of their GDP as we do if we were to defend that, and the Belgians as well, because otherwise we are just flooded by the sides. But the Germans don't need to do that, because most of their land is well above the expected sea level rise. Ours is not. So for us, it's not abstraction, it's not ideology, it's not politics. It's what the hell we're gonna do. A lot of our history is already gone. It's dead man walking. There's nothing can be done about it anymore. And the people, will the people be able to live in their own country? That's the fight right now. Yeah, and that's part of the reason why the new generations, they don't have a utopic future. That's what they are being asked to contribute to at universities today. Contribute to our effort to figure out what to do, like floating all the farms in the country on enormous concrete barges where we will put land and cows on top, and linking those barges by enormous chains and being able to reconfigure them depending on the need and the season, grouping them in different ways, or building new housing in the east part of the country, which is the least populated, but it's well above sea level, or dealing with the way the traditional approaches to water defenses, because we are flooded not only by the sea through storm surges, we are flooded also from the other side, because the Rhine, which is the biggest river in Northern Europe, it comes from melted glass in the Alps, and it flows, guess where? To the Netherlands. So a lot of our land is dedicated to flood basins. In other words, it's land in the east where you cannot build anything, because that is the land that we will switch the gates in such a way that that's what will be flooded. If you have to be flooded anyway, you can at least choose where the flood is going to happen. That has been the way we do flooding defense in the Netherlands on the Rhine side of the story. But we may need that land, because from the other side, the sea may overwhelm us, may overwhelm coastal cities where most of the population is. So they need to go to the east. So what do you do now with the flood basins? You know what I mean? And a lot of work is being done there. And these young people, because we need to convince them that it's important for their future to do that, they get these horrible messages about the future. The future is counter-utopic or dystopic for a number of reasons, flooding being just one of them. It's tough to live like this. I'm relatively an old fart now. I'm 49, so probably can still manage to have a more or less normal life for the coming 2 decades before things get really nasty. So then I will have lived most of my life in the unique period of history and geography of history where there has been peace for 40 years, and that's Western Europe. Peace for 40 years, from 1950 to the 1990s. Well, into 2000, the 60 years, 50 years. That was unique, a unique period of peace and stability and prosperity. This has never happened before. And I had the privilege of having the core of my life in that period. But people who are being born today, my heart goes out to them.
What's the population of the Netherlands?
18 million. I think we just turned 18. It used to be 16, then 17. I think it's 18 now. Yeah. But most of them are now older. So we have an inverse pyramid in the Netherlands. We don't have enough young people to do the work that will be necessary to take care of the old people. When I will be old, there will not be enough young people to pay for my pension and pay for my care. So we'll have to figure out what to do. I mean, the US is an enormously privileged country in natural resources, in the extent of the geography. I mean, you guys even have oil, shale. You're independent in most rare earths, and the ones you're not, you have Canada just to the north. And when it comes to a healthy demographics, you have Mexico to the south, which has a very healthy demographics, a normal distribution of lifetimes. You guys are well set for a future without globalization. The south of the US will experience even an economic boom. Semiconductors manufacturing is coming back. High technology is coming back. You have Canada and Mexico, the most wonderful neighbors one any country could wish to have. Europe is a peninsula, don't have natural resources. All we have is cleverness, but there is a limit to cleverness. And we have a very angry, unhuman neighbor off to the east who is already wreaking havoc in the European lands. That's Russia. So it doesn't look great for us. No.
Oh man, you're making me feel bad. You need to back up to 18 million and move to Kansas. Come.
all we hope and pray
There's
for
plenty of
is
land there.
we hope and pray for that you and the newer generations in the US will remember and care for their European heritage. We have our fingers crossed for that.
We have deep ties to our European heritage. I mean, half the people I know have done, like me, I've even done a DNA test. That's how I knew where my family came from.
I did that too.
It's a very popular thing, and I think people feel ties back to. I mean, just sitting here. I mean, I was just feeling for the people of the Netherlands. That's why I was asking what the population was. I was like, wow, 18 million people having to deal with
a
what
small
you're
amount of
speaking
land. Tiny land, half of each under sea level. Yeah. But then what I meant by, I hope that you guys remember it, is that I hear politicians in the US saying, well, the war in Ukraine is Europe's problem. Leave it to them. And I can't even disagree because factually, the US doesn't have the divine obligation to come to our rescue. It has done it several times before, but there is no law of nature saying that the US should take care of Europe. So yeah, the politicians I heard saying that, they are right. At the same time, I hope you will find kindness in your heart again, because of your history and your heritage, to give us a hand, because it's going to get tough.
I think you'll find, especially in the future, in the next few years, that you'll start to see who the people are who are actually supporting Ukraine. And I think after our next election, I think you're gonna see more of an outpouring of help for Ukraine. I honestly think that it's an obligation. I know that's getting into a lot of deep politics, but I think there's a lot more people in the States who support the actions in Ukraine, or even further actions, than maybe people in Europe think.
I hope so. I don't think it's your God-given obligation. I don't think it is. I can't argue on principles that you should because you should. I can't do that, but I do hope you help out.
I think traditionally, I mean, I feel like our country has an obligation to help people who, good people need to have. I feel an obligation. I mean, I think we do have an obligation. We're all humans. We're just because we live in a different part of the world doesn't mean we don't have an obligation to help other humans who are doing the right things. We also have an obligation to take care of those who are not doing the right things in a different way. Take care of them in a different way.
I appreciate your saying that. I really appreciate your saying that.
I really do. I'm honest. I mean, that's how I feel. Sometimes I feel like I have to watch what I say, especially around my guests. But I think there's a lot more support than you think, and I think it'll come to life after the next election. Again, I didn't mean to get too political, but I honestly have faith in that. And I was, it's just like the situation in Israel. I was comforted. I don't know how I was comforted by Iran saying they weren't going to support Hezbollah or support Hamas.
My heart goes out to what's happening in Israel.
And then I see the Palestinians are kind of backing off a little bit. The PLO's backing off from their support of Hamas a little bit. So, I mean, I know there's no way to see any kind of silver lining right now, but honestly,
it's very difficult to see.
I was very surprised to see the statement from Iran that they were not going to take any action because they had threatened ground action, against Israel.
I
Or
haven't seen that. I'm hearing this from you. I'm very happy to hear that. I
no,
hadn't.
I mean that's what I've read. Maybe I could be wrong. Somebody in the comments correct me, but they had threatened that if Israel invaded Gaza, that they were going to take counteractions. And just recently, I think just as recently as last evening, they backed off of that, which to me was a good sign.
Well, that's at least one little piece of good news. But the alignment of Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea is it's very
Also,
worrying.
right, and also the leader, who's the PLO, the leader,
Mahmoud Abbas.
met with I think one of our diplomats from the United States.
Blinken, Anthony Blinken.
Yeah, Blinken, and they're talking. So we don't expect to see too much support from the PLO, or is it PLO or PLA?
No,
PLA
PLO
is
was
Chinese,
Yasser
right?
Arafat.
Yeah, that's right.
But they are the
PLA?
inheritors.
Is
the
it
Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, PLA or
Yeah.
Palestinian.
No, PA, Palestinian Authority. I think that's the politically
just
correct.
PA. Okay, yeah. So I'm showing my non-expertise, but I do try to read a lot. But they, it doesn't look like they're going to. So I don't know. That was a little bit because I thought we were headed towards World War III there for a minute.
Well, we may still be headed for it. There are some fundamental differences. I thought I had left all that behind, in my childhood, in Cold War and nuclear holocaust and all that. I thought, okay, we've grown out of that. Russia is a friend now. I was married to a Russian for 16 years. I've been to Russia. There are people in Russia who I still consider my family. But I was so naive about a great many things.
Yeah, it's awkward for me because I have one of my good friends here in Chattanooga imports Siberian larch that I buy from him for flooring and siding, and many builders use it here, so I kind of found a niche with it. But he's just I joke with him and say he's an old KGB guy, because he looks like your typical old KGB guy. And when he gives me a hard time about prices, I say, come on, KGB, give me a break. His name's Leo. And so, I have it's difficult when you know people on a personal basis like that to be against, to not understand, to be against what they're doing in Ukraine.
I mean, there's no reason to demonize the Russian people per se, in the sense that no, they didn't choose for this. But what makes it dangerous is at a social level, there isn't a culture in Russia of taking responsibility. That culture never developed. They came from czars to the Communist Party. So there never emerged a culture in which the citizens take responsibility for the actions of the government and either vote for it or rise against it or protest or take responsibility, which in the West it's the normal way, the normal course of life. The government is us. They are our representatives. So if they start acting in a way that doesn't represent us, we take action, we take responsibility for that. It's extremely natural. You do that by voting, you do that by protesting, you do that by writing letters to your representative. But there is no such culture in Russia. Their instinctive reaction when things start getting ugly is to turn inwards to their immediate group of friends and family and try to make sure that their lives can continue more or less okay. And they do not take responsibility for the actions of their representatives and governments, politicians, even industry leaders. And that's what is so dangerous, because a nuclear armed country can only be safely stopped from within when it's going berserk. Because from the outside, what are you going to do? Are you going to bomb a nuclear armed country? No, it can't be stopped from the outside. All you can do is defend the party that is being attacked, like helping Ukraine defend itself. You can't just go and stop this heinous thing, because it's a nuclear armed country. So the only way forward is for internally for something to happen that can stop it, because Russia is not going to nuke itself. But in a country where there is no culture of taking social responsibility, no culture of citizenship, which we all take for granted. What does it mean to be a citizen? They don't have that there. And that's what makes it so enormously dangerous to deal with a country that is armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I've seen interviews with actual Russian citizens who they just their mentality is that, well, Ukraine is Russian. Why are you asking me about?
They buy into the story. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Germans did that too, but you can forgive the Germans in the sense that in the 1930s, you could only listen to the radio. The radio was controlled by the government. There was no internet. There was no social media. There were no phones. All you had was the radio, and that's how you got your news. So, of course, you bought into the government story. But in the 21st century, in the age of VPN, mobile telephony, wireless internet via satellite, it's difficult to accept that the Russian population is so complacent with this.
But at least in Germany, you had the resistance, right?
You had that too. There were 32.
You don't really see that in Russia.
Yeah. And the Germans tried to kill Hitler 32 times.
Yeah,
32 times they tried to kill the man.
What were those little? We can't drop those little Liberator pistols that we dropped in Germany.
Yeah,
the little single-use pistols they used to drop out of the. They drop them and
go and kill Hitler
to the resistance. Yeah, you can't do that in Russia.
Yeah.
Well, Tony, how do we end this with a pause? Give me something happy. Tell me something. There's hope out there, right? There's hope.
Well, there has to be. There is hope in the foundation of our shared humanity. At the end of the day, everybody's human. So you hope that there will be shared values that will speak louder at the end and prevent a complete annihilation of this whole party. Yeah, at this point, that's what we have to hold on to, hope. And hope that there is some universal intelligence that has veto power on some things.
It's almost like that's true sometimes, isn't it? I was born on the day of the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, October 16th, 1962. And I never knew, obviously, that if such a dire... My parents didn't even tell me that I was born. I didn't find out until I was like 12 years old.
It could have ended right there, the day you were born. Yeah,
but it was almost close. Like there was some divine intervention.
Well, let us hope so. I mean, God doesn't seem to stop heinous things. They are happening all the time. But let's hope that there is a sort of a threshold level in which it gets so bad that God says, no, up to here, but no further.
Or at least gives men the wisdom to retract their actions.
Or
limit them.
Like Kennedy and Khrushchev had.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Let us hope so. Let's keep our fingers crossed, Tony.
Well, thank you so much, Bernardo. Thank you for all the time that you gave me today. It's really awesome, all the different things we spoke about. It was great getting to know you better. And
it was a pleasure to talk to you, Tony, sincerely. I can be more myself than my usual.
That makes me feel good, because I really get nervous about not having all the ability to challenge someone on an intellectual level.
That would be boring if you did that.
So it's great. All right. Well, thank you, Bernardo. I really appreciate it again. I can't say thank you enough. And
if you would have me again, I would be very happy.
Man, I would love that. I hate to keep inviting people back, because I know they may say yes just to be nice, but I appreciate
you can invite me.
You're my favorite guest, and I really enjoy it, and I feel like I can be relaxed and just talk about.
You should you should feel absolutely free to invite me back.
Well, I really appreciate it, and thank you so much, Bernardo.
It's been a pleasure, man. Good to see you. It's very good to see you again.
Thank you.
Take care, sir. I'm going to go have some dinner now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. There you go. Bernardo is one awesome guy. That's awesome. I love the way he gives his time. I've had people literally turn me down for these types of interviews. I won't mention names, but it just shows me, the people who do share their time, it shows me their character, and it just I don't know, it just does something for me, for Bernardo Kastrup to come spend time with a carpenter who's not formally trained in philosophy or physics, to spend that time to commit 3 hours and 4 minutes of his day. It's pretty awesome. So I think it's been so long, I'm going to have to go back and check the record on the Amazon giveaway. I don't think the problem is nobody went and followed directions. You were supposed to go to the website and fill out the form and put your email address there, and nobody put their email address. So I can't pick. There was only 2 questions submitted through the giveaway I mentioned, and neither one gave their email address. So we'll do something again. I appreciate everybody in the audience. Next time, be looking for the call for questions. The video I do before, about 3 or 4 days before, I'll do a call for questions, and then the people who do that go through the website form. The reason I use the form on the website is because the way the questions are compiled, I can print them off on a spreadsheet. I can pick a winner. They're numbered, all of that. But anyway, too much rambling. I appreciate everybody for watching, and we will see you next time.
What you are about to see is a real-life story. The accounts have gone into great detail to give each side's version of this, an exclusive one, we understand. One of the most talked about